Chapter 5:16. In the fierce battle with Jean Tong, the two puppets in the grotto had put in a lot of effort. The mushed-mouth ape had been killed 7 times in a row. If he were to change his name every time he died, he would be called Yuan Jiu now. There was also Mo Luan. He had been killed twice and could now be called Mo Luan III. The successive resurrection of the puppets indeed brought a great deal of consumption to Jean Tong, but it was not without a price. Of these two puppets, the rotten-mouth ape used his own kind as a base, while Mo Luan used Gang Xiong to transform them with a single shot. After the puppet was formed, the cost of forging it again was reduced, but that was only relatively speaking. The mountain of bones in the outer seas of Xia City was proof of this. The reserves that the Blood Soul Temple had accumulated over the past few days had been completely used up in order to support their consumption. The human-faced arachnid had borrowed the power of the Jean Tong to stir up a powerful electromagnetic field. It was also a soul-sucking lure. It had practically slaughtered all the sea creatures within a radius of 200 kilometers. Only then was it able to barely support the Blood Soul Temple. Oh, there were also those unlucky bastards from the 5 Metals hunting group. Actually, if Jean Tong could calm his mind a bit, or if he could kill the mushed-mouth ape and Mo Luan a bit more fiercely and quickly, he could kill 2 more rounds of the human-faced arachnid before it could successfully transform into an external demon. Then perhaps Luo Nen really would have lost all of his corrosive light. Victory and defeat were separated by a thin line. However, the person who replayed the battle could only be the one who was alive. No matter how difficult it was for Luo Nan to win, no matter how distressed he was right now, these were all treatments that only the victor could enjoy. Now, the golden tree essence chi that the altar frame had seized should be divided equally between Rue Wen and the Blood Soul Temple. However, with Rue Wen's unique ability to assimilate her body and soul, she had no interest in these foreign impurities. She did not accept them at all, which benefited the Blood Soul Temple. The problem was that in the level of a closed system, the Blood Soul Temple really did not have the capital to monopolize it. A portion of it would be transferred to the Wraith Sign to enjoy, and the Wraith Sign would divide out a portion to offer to Luonan. Most of the resources used by the Bloody Soul Temple were used to build the Path of Blood and Fire. Currently, the altar at the summit had just been built, and the first 5 stages of the Bloody Soul Temple had been completed. There wasn't much left. The Blood Soul Temple was still continuously converting the impurities from the outside world to replenish their losses. The whirlpool in the lava lake in the stone forest was surging. It was chaotic. However, even if one could only enter the first 2 floors but not leave, the majority of the blood-red light was intercepted by the 3rd floor. Luonan watched the 2 stone puppets absorb the bloody light in an unending stream, while the 4th floor was only able to get some leftovers. This level of authority was messed up. He had originally wanted to interfere and see what kind of abnormality Jean Tong's bright light mark would produce. But after careful observation and evaluation, if the mark of light was to be completely enriched, the current amount of blood light energy would not be enough, even if it was multiplied by 10. Based on the situation of the cave puppets, it had at least 70 to 80% of Jean Tong's combat power at its peak, so the energy reserves needed were naturally massive. Unless he killed another transcendent, go to hell. Luo Nan suppressed this dangerous thought to the bottom of his heart for the time being. He couldn't help but think, what would happen if I went hunting? The wilderness, the ocean, or the cloud world? Luo Nan felt a bit delighted. It was hard not to have such thoughts after beheading an extraordinary of the 100 Greats level. But very quickly, a phone call suppressed his emotional water level by a lot. The call was from Emoya. She asked immediately, "Are you okay? Why wasn't he at the charity hall? Where are you, the police station?" I'm fine. I'm fine. Only now did Luo Nan recall that the St. Mary's Church Hospital was one of the many murder sites reported by the Xia City Police. It was only a wall away from the charity hall they were at last night. No wonder Emoya exploded in anger. Based on this deduction, wasn't his attitude a little too calm today? Luo Nan felt that it was a bit inappropriate, but he couldn't change it for the time being. He could only answer honestly, "We're currently at the South City Administration Hall doing the procedures. Today is Sunday. Something happened at the charity hall. It's not good to stay any longer, so I asked someone to. Luo Nan pondered as he lied. Was this reason really useful? I'm coming. Hey, it's all over. Hey. The other side had already hung up. Luo Nan couldn't help but sigh. Rui Wen's procedures were more or less done at this time. Could it be that he was still waiting here for Emoya to come over? Rui Wen, dressed in a simple t-shirt and cowboy attire, walked out from a compartment in the administration hall right as he was thinking. She was expressionless out of habit. Gauda followed closely by her side. As for the middle-aged man who was 2 steps behind her, he was a deputy chief of the Xia City SCA branch office. His surname was Hu. He had been requested by He Yueyin to be appointed by the Xia City SCA branch office. He had rushed over specifically to help with the relevant business. As a high-ranking member of the SCA, this deputy chief who possessed a clearer understanding of the inner world. His information was updated quite promptly, and he didn't lack the proper attitude. Perhaps it was because of this that he was selected by the bureau to come over. Look at his expression. In any case, it wasn't natural. After all, the previous person in charge of this business, the person who had arranged for Luo Nan's group to be sent to the St. Mary's Charity Hall, was currently in the police freezer with his 9 companions, waiting to be cremated. Quantum Corporation was responsible for all funeral expenses, spending people's money, helping people block disasters. It was nothing more than this. Rui Wen didn't say a word. She walked to Luo Nan's side and stood there quietly. Whether it was the SCA's deputy chief Hu or Qin Ikuan and Gauda, who were responsible for Luo Nan and Rui Wen's safety, none of them discovered that this thin, quiet, stunted girl had disappeared for 3 seconds half an hour ago. She had floated back after killing an extraordinary. In reality, even though Luo Nan had seen everything from start to finish and had even helped guide and locate her, he was still in a dream right now. Luo Nan smiled at Rui Wen and bowed to express his thanks to Deputy Chief Hu. Thank you, Chief Hu, for your help. He just spoke a few simple words of courtesy. He didn't really understand much else. Luckily, Deputy Chief Hu was quite slick. He chuckled and said, "You're welcome. You're welcome. According to Mr. Luo's request, this child's relationship has been transferred to the Forest Wall District's Lan Town Welfare Institute. Both sides are fine. Once the procedures are completed, we can handle the adoption procedures." Deputy Chief, who was clearly playing dumb. He did his best to distance himself from the 16 billion or 0.02%. He did his best to control his gaze and not meet Rui Wen's. Luo Nan was well aware of this, but he ignored it. The so-called Lan Town Welfare Institute was the one overseen by the Dean of Myriad Pagoda. Luo Nan had Rui Wen transfer her relationship there because this was the only place Luo Nan knew of. The Xia City branch didn't have a similar organization, so it was inconvenient to operate. Of course, it was just in name. Luo Nan would still keep Rui Wen by his side in the future. He couldn't let her go to the Welfare Institute. Luo Nan had a very good impression of the Dean of Myriad Pagoda, but this was a terrifying temptation on the level of 16 billion. Using unnecessary tests to measure a person's heart was really a very unnecessary and foolish action. Luo Nan had already notified the Dean of Myriad Pagoda before this. He would soon start the adoption procedures for Rui Wen. It was just that it was impossible for him to do this with his age. He needed to obtain the consent of his aunt and uncle. Emoya had left last night in order to get some information. He just didn't know what the results were. Luo Nan's mind wandered a bit as he thought about it. He was destined to be absolutely not a good person to chat with. He easily turned the topic cold. Deputy Chief, whose mood was a bit complicated. He wanted to stay far away from Luo Nan due to his safety instincts, but he also wanted to befriend Luo Nan. Luo Nan pressed his ear while he was in a dilemma. "Excuse me, I need to take a call." Deputy Chief, who hurriedly said, "Just do what you need to do." Luo Nan nodded toward him and connected to the hexa ear. Papercut was contacting him through voice. Papercut first asked about Rui Wen's situation in the beginning, and Luo Nan didn't hide anything from him. Papercut was a bit shocked. "You're really going to adopt her? They're putting all the pressure on you." "There's no difference. It's just a matter of time." Luo Nan already had a realization. A huge business deal of 16 billion would make the vast majority of people in the world go crazy. Those greedy people would be like mad dogs, searching for any opportunity to take a bite. Then they would bite down without letting go. Once Luo Nen stood on the stage, even if it was just his silhouette, he would be picked up by them sooner or later. Hiding, concealing, shifting, and the like would no longer have any meaning in the future. He would no longer have any fate with the so-called low profile. Luo Nen chatted for a bit and suddenly felt strange. Brother Papercut, you're quite well informed. I just finished the procedures over here. Papercut laughed. I'm with Dean Wan. Are you coming over in a bit? Huh? What's up? Luo Nen really didn't have this plan today. He had already made an appointment with He Yuan. Once Rue Wen's matters were settled, they would seriously discuss the security upgrade plan for him, Rue Wen, and his family. However, it felt quite strange for Papercut, who had nothing to do with Dean Wan, to appear at the orphanage. Papercut went straight to the point when Luo Nen asked, "It's because of the matter with old Jai. His situation is a bit strange right now. Can you come over and take a look?" Worker Jai? That's right. I heard that not long after you left last night, he seemed to have thought of something. He stayed outside in the rain for an entire night, ignoring everyone. It was that kid, Di Weiwu, who called me. Papercut sent Luo Nen a video. Luo Nen skimmed it a few times, but he didn't actually watch it seriously. This was because he could observe things through a more intuitive form. His thoughts stirred, and he followed the outline of the soul cloak. He crossed a distance of nearly 100 kilometers and arrived at the Orchid Town orphanage in the Forest Wall district. At this moment, Worker Jai was not in the orphanage. Instead, he was sitting by the roadside outside. There was a relatively regular stone under his butt, and his body was like a statue as he stared blankly at the freezing rain that was falling from the gaps between the buildings. In front of Worker Jai, the abandoned driveway that ran through the Riverwu district, Forest Wall district, and Trigate district was already covered in thin ice. The bandits on the road had also quietened down. Luo Nen frowned as he observed Worker Jai for a moment. His initial judgment was that Worker Jai was in a state that seemed to be calm yet wasn't. It was a bit like an epiphany. The breadth and depth of Worker Jai's processing of information should have increased. Dean Wan and I both feel that old Jai has entered some sort of state of enlightenment. However, it's hard to say what he's comprehending. This is a matter of the spiritual domain. You're an expert and you've been close to Jai Yunsheng recently. Do you have any guesses? When did I become an expert? Luo Nen shook his head. Actually, he already had a general understanding of what was going on. Moreover, he could solve the problem right now. However, doing this would be too shocking and it might expose his trump card. I'd better go there. Chapter 517. Emoya, you must have been racing. Luo Nen looked at the time. Even if the South City District Administrative Hall wasn't that far away from the Santa Maria Charity Hall, it was a bit too exaggerated for him to have arrived so soon after hanging up the phone. I'll be there in a bit. Luo Nen gave Papercut a reply first, then he hung up temporarily. He waved his hand at Emoya. As soon as he raised his hand, he regretted it. Speaking of which, from last night until now, he had stirred up a storm in the city and killed so many people that his eyes were bloodshot. He had not considered anything else. Speaking of which, Emoya wasn't someone who could be easily dealt with just a random excuse. He seemed to have exposed too many flaws during this period of time. But at this stage, there was no point in confessing anything other than making his family worried. But on the other hand, if the situation did not improve, it would not be a good thing for the family to not be vigilant. At the end of the day, this was a dilemma. It was his impulsive decision to accept Rue Wen's burden, but he was unable to resolve the repercussions. This was the inevitable result. Fortunately, the fruit wasn't ripe yet. There was still room for development. He didn't have much time to think. Emoya arrived in a few steps. It must be said that Emoya was originally a superclothes rack. After entering the commercial company, her current attire was even more like that of a celebrity. She wore a punk-style motorcycle leather jacket on her body and wore sunglasses. She looked extremely cool and dashing. However, Luo Nan knew very well that the hard-soled boots she was wearing were very painful to kick. This was clearly just an outfit for the convenience of fighting. However, Emoya actually let out a sigh of relief after seeing Luo Nan and Rue when both standing in the hall, safe and sound. Perhaps she had been too worried and on edge, so she lost her energy here. Or perhaps she had to pay attention to maintaining a bit of her image in front of Rue One. She just took off her sunglasses and used them to nod at Luo Nan. You need to greet me in the future. Otherwise, how would I know if you're the one in the corpse bag that's being carried out? Luo Nan chuckled and gave an irrelevant answer. You came really fast. Of course, the rioters blew up a building just 2 or 3 blocks away from the Hall of Mercy. There's not even a ghost on the streets now. Don't you know? I know, but I had already left by then. It's only 4 blocks away from that building. What else could Luo Nan say? He could only smile. Fortunately, at this time, Rue One attracted his attention. Emoya took great pity on this silent, thin, and weak child. She laughed as she bypassed Luo Nan to touch Rue One's cheek. You didn't get scared, did you? It'll be much easier to stay at home in the future. Wow, the little guy's skin is so good. This was not the first time Emoya sighed with emotion. With Rue One's special innate talent of body and soul merging, her entire body was pure and translucent, almost inhuman. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was spotless, and that her skin was like jade. Even with a magnifying glass, one wouldn't be able to find any flaws. It was useless for Emoya to be envious of him. Luo Nan was still worried. If Rue One wasn't used to Emoya's intimate actions and disappeared into thin air in a flash, that would be quite awkward. Fortunately, Rue One was very calm, and could even be said to be very obedient. She allowed Emoya to fiddle with her, but her eyes were always fixed on this woman who was a head taller than her. It seemed that she was observing her, and perhaps even a little curious. This is a good start. In the end, Emoya was still a semi-professional who raised a younger brother at home. She wasn't blindly unrestrained and passionate. After expressing enough goodwill towards Rue One, she continued to close the distance from a new angle. Let me see. The wristband is already fitted. The SCA is the most active at times like this. Have you added me as a friend yet? Come. I'll be the first. Perhaps it was because she was stained with the blood of the Luo family. But Emoya was quite accomplished when it came to acting as if no one else was present. Deputy Bureau Chief, who was a bit embarrassed, to the side. He subconsciously coughed. He was a bit confused about the relationship between Luo Nan and Emoya. At first, he thought that they were ability users or friends or lovers, but then he felt that it wasn't the case. They were most likely brother and sister. Huh? Why do I feel that it's a bit weird? Deputy Bureau Chief, who faintly felt that he had grasped something, but he couldn't make it clear for a time. Right when he was in a daze, he heard Emoya introduce her communicator number to Rue One. Oh, this is my name, Emoya. If you want to chat with me, just tap on it. Voice control is fine too. Emoya. Deputy Bureau Chief, who was still under a lot of pressure. His mind was a bit absent-minded. He subconsciously said this name. Emoya turned her head in a daze. You are? Huh? Who? Uncle who? Emoya never thought that she would bump into someone she knew here. Moreover, this person's identity was quite sensitive. She was also stunned for a moment. Fortunately, she reacted quickly. She recalled the surname of this middle-aged man and greeted him. She felt that she was a generation lower than him. She had no choice. This deputy bureau chief who was in the same Xia City SCA branch as her father. Even though they weren't under the same command, they were still on the same level. She had met him a few times during the internal family parties of the branch. She had even been half-truthfully mentioned as a partner. Oh my! It seemed that her mouth had been slapped just now. Emoya pondered in her mind, but her face had a brilliant smile. Uncle who? Why are you here? Aren't you resting today? He. Deputy Bureau Chief who only knew how to laugh dryly for a time. His mind was a bit muddled in that instant. He looked at Emoya, Then he looked at Luonan. Finally, through a certain nerve in his brain, he connected the two domains that didn't belong to each other. He connected the two siblings before him together. Bullshit authority of the inner world. Within a second, Deputy Bureau Chief, who had cordially greeted the 18 generations of the ancestors of a certain big shot in the system who had decided to isolate the authority information system of the secular world and the inner world. He had severed the mapping relationship. He had also given an important explanation on the family relationships of this big shot. Did the PR company of the inner world cheat on your wife? Otherwise, why would they come up with such an idea that would even clog up the Photoshop? In this moment, Deputy Bureau Chief, who recalled the flying shuttle that crashed near the SCA office building this morning, extending his line of thought a bit further, he suddenly had a reasonable explanation for the 4 unidentified deaths in the machine-operated cafeteria of the Bible Corporation, the wife of a certain high-ranking employee of their branch. Of course, he would never forget that the entire leadership had worked overtime and been on standby since last night. They had quickly pulled out a long death list. What was even more bullshit was that they couldn't do anything under the influence of powerful figures in the military and government. Deputy Bureau Chief, whose originally pale face faded even more. He noticed that Moya's gaze had already turned a bit doubtful, and the expression of that damned ancestor next to her was a bit unkind. What the hell was this? Deputy Bureau Chief, who used his decades of ruthless work experience to instantly deduce the most likely relationship state between this pair of siblings and their family. Then a smile blossomed on his face. Oh. It really is you, Moya. You're a big star now. Then this is the one from the Hai Hang family. He was a bit at a loss for words for a time. Luckily, he quickly pulled back his mask and turned his gaze to Luonan. He continued to chuckle. So it's the child of the Hai Hang family. I remember that you're my nephew, right? We've met before, but you were too young back then. You were also very shy. I didn't recognize you at all today. If I had known about this relationship earlier, I wouldn't have needed Mr. Gao to introduce me. You could have just told Hai Hang to let me know. Luonan blinked and put on a smile. I'm sorry, Uncle Hu. I'm sorry about what happened just now. I was young back then, so I didn't remember it clearly. I didn't dare greet you. The two began to chuckle together. The atmosphere was quite harmonious. However, Moya's gaze cut back and forth between the two's faces a few times. Her meaning was very clear. Are you King kidding me? It must be said that Deputy Chief, who was a veteran actor, this bit of improvisation shouldn't have been a problem for him. However, his condition today really wasn't that great. His performance was a bit stiff. As for Luonan, there was no need to even mention him. Deputy Chief, who also knew that saying too much would only lead to more mistakes. He puffed out his belly and laughed. The matter has been settled. We've gotten to know each other again. Originally, I should be treating you guys to a meal as an elder. Oh, the timing isn't right. I still have some things to do over there. I'll find some time later. Having said this, he braced himself and revealed a smile towards the legendary 2000ths of a girl. This little fellow is quite clever. Your family has gained another piece of good fortune. Hold on. If I say these words, won't someone think that I'm mocking him? Deputy Chief, who felt that he already didn't know how to speak. Luckily, Moya had a certain standard when it came to the ways of the world. She immediately smiled and bowed. This is all thanks to your help, Uncle Hu. My family will definitely hold a feast to thank you later. Please do come. Okay. Deputy Chief, who made up his mind. He was going to leave Xia City right now. He was going to book a plane ticket immediately. It didn't matter where he was going. Even in a state of emergency, a leader should theoretically be on duty 24 hours a day. But wouldn't it be fine if he gave up his year-end bonus this year? Moya watched Deputy Chief Hu walk out of the administrative hall in a hurry. She gazed at Luonan. Then her gaze swept over Qin Ikuan and Gao De. She suddenly smiled. Excellent. As the saying goes, a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at in a new light. My boy, your current social circle is quite spectacular. Go back and tell Mom. She'll definitely be very happy. The corner of Luo Nan's eye twitched. I'm in high school after all. Emoya lowered her voice a bit. Really? You've put down your previous work? You don't have any problems with your funds, right? Luo Nan was stupefied when faced with the biggest benefactor of his life. But he could only shake his head right now. He understood in his heart that it wouldn't be that easy to get through this time. Who knew that Emoya would raise an eyebrow and change the topic? The procedures are done. Are you going home? I'm going to take Rue-1 to the orphanage to perfect the procedures. Do you want to come with me? Luo Nan took the initiative to invite her, but Emoya unexpectedly refused. She put on her sunglasses and shook her head. I have a schedule tonight. I should go meet up. You guys just pay attention to your safety. No problem. The group of people walked out of the administrative hall like this. Emoya had just bought a red sports car a few days ago. She smiled as she gave Rue-1 a light hug. Then she nodded goodbye to Chin Ikuin and Gauda before getting into the car. The car window slid down. Only now did she hook her hand at Luo Nan. Luo Nan walked forward and bent down to look at her. Emoya's eyes stared over from behind her sunglasses. I've always believed that people without ideals are trash worse than dogs, but don't make me regret supporting you. Luo Nan was silent for a second before spitting out a word. I won't. Her voice was faint, but it was clear and distinct within the classic rumbling noise of the sports car's engine. Chapter 518. The jeep started moving. It first headed south, circled around the Huanhai Highway, and headed toward the Western Forest Wall District. Luo Nan received Emoya's reminder in the car. He gave his aunt a call. The outside world was in a state of chaos. He had to report that he was safe no matter what. The call didn't last long. It ended after a minute or two. Everything was normal on the phone, but Luo Nan couldn't help but stroke his brows. He didn't know when his brows had become knotted. It must be known that the entirety of Xia City was under the surveillance of his soul cloak. Luo Nan poured his thoughts into it, and no changes in the situation at home could be hidden from his eyes. Luo Nan's aunt and uncle were sitting in the living room at home right now. The two were silent. Luo Shuqing had been fiddling with the wristband on her wrist the entire time after the call ended. Her expression could be described as calm or repressed. She wasn't as calm as she appeared on the phone. As for Luo Nan's uncle, Mo Haihang, he was sitting to the side. He was hugging his stupid, black and thick mobile workstation, operating it. He even had an electronic cigarette in his mouth. Steam rose and it made a sizzling sound. This scene made Luo Nan think of the time when he eavesdropped on Luo Nan's uncle and aunt's conversation. They and Emoya, where did their train of thought go? Luo Nan spoke subconsciously. He didn't want to hear an answer. He just wanted to calm his emotions a bit. Chin Ikuin, who was next to him, thought seriously for a moment. He replied, From Miss Emoya's behavior, perhaps she believes that your research results have been sold for a good price, or that you have a very powerful investor. Luo Nan was stunned for a moment. He turned his head. Chin Ikuin spoke softly. The research of supernatural powers has made quite a bit of progress in recent years. It also represents a certain trend. Therefore, there has always been a lot of active capital in the outer circles of the inner world. They will always set their eyes on some projects with potential. They will use all kinds of methods to invest in relationships in an attempt to get a share of the pie. Of course, once capital is injected, whether ability users or capital is the leader will depend on the specific situation and analysis. Luo Nan went, Oh! Chin Ikuin's words reminded him of something similar. Octopus and Cragburst had told him about this before. Octopus had yet to finalize his latest thesis, but a pharmaceutical company had already come knocking on his door. They wished to jointly develop relevant targeted drugs. It was said that the VAM agreement was quite considerable. In this sense, it was not impossible to say that Luo Nan's research results could be sold for a good price. This is a good reason. Luo Nan was a bit moved. If he could do more research on this and gradually transfer his situation in the inner world, it would not be a problem. Instead of letting the family's imagination run wild, it was better to guide them in a controllable direction. In any case, Uncle and Aunt's acceptance of this matter should be better than ordinary people who had no concept. He asked for Chin Ikuin's opinion. Brother Chin, what do you think about the topic research on targeting drugs based on formatting theory? Do you think it will work if you use it to attract investments? Chin Ikuin shook his head. I'm a layman. Luonan grew excited. I think it's quite reliable. Actually, there are projects. Brother Octopus's progress is quite good already. I can ask Sister Yuein to help draft up a plan later. As Luonan's accumulated power was released layer by layer and soared all the way, he already possessed a prominent position in the inner world. He also possessed the corresponding right to speak. All right, perhaps it was his companions at the Xia City branch who were flattering him. But Luonan felt that the matter of pushing out a genuine formatting theory and giving his grandfather a proper name could be put on the agenda in the near future. Formatting theory itself had all sorts of problems. Yuein had warned that formatting theory deviated greatly from the mainstream research direction of the world. But Luonan, a living example, would attract a portion of people to join in the research of formatting theory and form new results. It must be known that Luonan would certainly be one of the most eye-catching focal points of the inner world for some time in the future, unless he was cleanly eliminated by someone. Brother Octopus was a successful example. Luonan hoped that hundreds and thousands of such examples would appear. In that case, his grandfather. Luonan's suddenly excited mood stopped for a moment. He couldn't help but think of the hospital's diagnosis of his grandfather's condition. He subconsciously used his soul cloak to roughly observe his grandfather's current situation. An old man, who was already emaciated and deformed, was wrapped in a thick blanket in the hospital room. He sat on the bed and stared blankly at the pattering freezing rain outside. Luonan didn't know what this rain, this city, and this world looked like in his grandfather's eyes. The severe symptoms of schizophrenia caused everything before this old man's eyes to transform into the harshest and most realistic of illusions. In this unchangeable and distorted world, even the most rigorous rationality had to yield to the patient's instinctive feelings, creating absurd logic. Even for the patient, it was still rigorous and thorough. It was impeccable. Reality was just this sorrowful. Luonan's soul cloak gave him an astonishing range of perception, but it also made it impossible for him to avoid this reality. He didn't even have the chance to buffer. But perhaps it was because of the continuous advancement of his cultivation and the influence of his glorious battle achievements. Luonan had a marvelous confidence and premonition right now. Perhaps it was a misconception. In reality, this wasn't something that suddenly appeared. It had formed a long time ago. If his grandfather always adhered to the logic of formatting theory, then perhaps the only person who could communicate with him would be Luonan himself. Even if he couldn't do it right now, sooner or later he would discover a docking window as his understanding and application of formatting theory deepened. Luonan had once thought of using a psychic's drawing to try it out, but now that he thought about it, it was quite unrealistic. Due to the aggravation of his schizophrenia, the heavens knew what the drawing looked like in his grandfather's eyes. Only by truly connecting their minds could that tiny bit of possibility be unearthed. Luonan turned his head to face Rue-1 when his thoughts reached this point. It'll be a bit quieter in 2 days. I'll take you to see my grandfather. There's a new person in the family. I should at least let him know. Rue-1 listened quietly. She didn't say much. Luonan knew that she didn't refuse, and that was enough. Luonan let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair. He slightly closed his eyelids, but when he wanted to open them again, he felt that they were strangely heavy. A deep black tide surged over in an instant, nearly engulfing him. He did his best to open his eyes twice, but he actually couldn't open them. He nearly wanted to fall asleep, but he was suddenly startled in his daze. He suddenly exerted strength and broke out in a layer of cold sweat. Only then did his drowsiness disappear a bit. Mr. Luo? Chin Ikuin noticed Luonan's mental state. He was a bit worried. You should sleep in the car for a bit. You haven't slept for nearly 40 hours. It's nothing. I was just thinking about something. Luo Nan told a completely unconvincing lie and said, "Open the car windows. Let some air in." This didn't quite meet the security requirements, but God, who sat in the driver's seat, still did as he was told. As the car windows were lowered, the air currents brought about by the high-speed travel, along with the freezing rain and cold air, surged in. This caused Luo Nan's mind to shake, and quite a bit of his drowsiness disappeared. However, he understood very well that this was a temporary phenomenon. Not sleeping for 40 hours wasn't a reason for him to be sleepy. With his current level of cultivation and attainments, not sleeping for 4 days was no big deal. However, the current situation was different in the end. The root of everything was still the soul cloak that he had unfurled with all his strength. From Luo Nan's perspective, as long as the large production line of his closed system operated endlessly, the area covered by the soul cloak could endlessly expand outwards. The area covered by the soul cloak had already been pushed out nearly 600 kilometers, not counting the area on land. Moreover, it showed no signs of stopping. It was because of this that Luo Nan was able to accurately lock onto Jin Tong's position within the boundless ocean. He set up an ambush and killed this heavily injured extraordinary in the shortest amount of time possible. But the matter of expanding the range was the natural result of his closed system and his special interference method. It was just like stuffing things into a hard drive. The framework was there. It was a matter of course. Anyone could do it. However, to sort out a logic that ran through everything from beginning to end within a hard drive that was crammed full of information, and to perform efficient calculations in a timely manner, the difficulty had risen by more than a single level. In the cloud world, the range of Luo Nan's soul cloak's expansion was much vaster than in the cloud world. It was just that the environment there was relatively monotonous and the targets were limited. There was no need for any calculations at all. But in Xia City, he needed to sort out and quickly process all sorts of information within this vast region. This included, but was not limited to, 20 transportation layers, 24 administrative districts, several dozen professional employment organizations, over 100 dangerous targets from the inner world, and countless dangerous nodes and locations. After all, no one knew when or how a fatal crisis would befall him or any of his loved ones. Luo Nan undoubtedly felt guilty for creating such a situation. This was no longer just a problem of energy and ability. It also included straightforward pressure and suppression. Luo Nan thought about the matters of his loved ones in his mind. A considerable portion of them were precisely the deformed embodiment of this pressure. Right now, the pressure was as great as a mountain, and the exhaustion of his mental strength was severe. But he needed to maintain a calm demeanor in front of others, especially Rue One. Otherwise, how could he display the responsibility he should have? However, these days could not continue for too long. Luo Nan intentionally diverted his attention in order to avoid being assaulted by his fatigue once more. His eyeballs swiveled, and his gaze stopped at the front control screen. A video program was playing there. God had turned it on after getting in the car. God and Qin Ikuin were both professionals. Their professional standards were extremely high. Normally, when they were driving and executing missions, they would not be distracted by other matters. But right now, they were paying attention to this program because it was relatively sensitive and closely related to the mission. Right now, the program was displaying a certain region in the outer seas of Xia City. The Hill of Bones was floating on the surface of the sea. Luo Nan had nothing to say. Is Zhang Ji still broadcasting live? Qin Ikuin answered. Right now, she's only providing the live footage. The main point is still the analysis of the experts. God increased the volume of the program as he spoke, and he transmitted the image to the audio and video system in the back seats. Without the stimulating, immersive scene, the appeal of Zhang Ji's live broadcast would drop by over half. Right now, they were faced with this extremely topical topic, but there was no straightforward answer to the Hill of Bones. It was the turn of the experts from all walks of life to step onto the stage and display their talent for nonsense. It was reasonable to say that the most important question was who created the Hill of Bones. However, a large portion of the energy of the experts from all walks of life wasn't focused on this. Instead, they were focused on the accumulating gold beneath the Hill of Bones. This dual-purpose ship possessed a very strong symbolic significance, especially when the search work continued. More and more corpses and remains of the members of the 5-metal hunting group were found in the surrounding seas. The topic of discussion inevitably pointed towards a most crucial point. The 5-metal hunting group was nearly completely annihilated. This was something that could already be confirmed. But had the true soul of the group, Enchanting, already melted into this hill of bones? Not even his bones remained? Or did he rely on the inconceivable abilities of extraordinaries to avoid death? Whether he lived or died, whether he survived or perished, this determined the nature of this matter. Aside from this, even if the number of people who died was multiplied by 10, it still wouldn't have any decisive significance. And for the Xia City branch, the focus of their attention was different. Qin Yikuan spoke in a low voice, looking at the intelligence from the various airlines and various internal transportation points. I'm afraid that there will be a large number of people entering the country in the next few days. The intimidation generated by this live broadcast is lower than we expected. If Her Majesty Empress Wu could. Sigh. Qin Yikuan felt that it was useless to say anything more when he spoke to this point. He shook his head and shut his mouth. However, Luo Nan already understood what Qin Yikuan meant. He shook his head as well, but the meaning behind Qin Yikuan's words was quite different. 16 billion. 2 out of 1,000. The vast majority of people will be tempted. But the ones who are tempted and have the power to act will always be a small portion. Qin Yikuan found Luo Nan's words strange. The problem is that since these people have the power to act, they won't easily let go. If we can't stop this momentum, then it can only prove that we haven't killed enough of these fellows with the power to act. Qin Yikuan was speechless. Luo Nan's eyelids trembled slightly. He was still restrained by his drowsiness. His voice was a bit indistinct. A few days ago, I participated in Charlie and Tianlai's funerals. I thought through a problem. Since we are all part of a large network of social relationships, a certain lack will cause discomfort. People will habitually make an issue out of this network. Those people treat me like this. And if I want to counterattack, killing a few people will affect many more people. I will be exhausted from running for my life in the future. Brother Qin, don't you think this makes sense? Qin Yikuan was unable to respond. God looked over through the rearview mirror. This young genius in the eye of the storm. Has he finally revealed his worry? Luo Nan's drooping eyelids covered his pupils. It was impossible to see what he was thinking in the end. On the program, the rather die-hard faction and the rather lively faction were still arguing. If they could fight, the two sides would certainly beat the brains out of each other. Luo Nan could only think in this clamorous and lively atmosphere. Fortunately, there is a phenomenon in this world. It's called birds of a feather flock together. The freezing rain fell without end. The infrastructure of the high-altitude stratum was good, but it was indifferent to this. However, the feeling of watching the rolling muddy water form a line in the recycling stratum as it fell from the sky wasn't that wonderful. According to statistics, 14 of the 24 administrative districts of Xia City possessed the recycling stratum. The Western City District and the 4 satellite cities had the most recycling stratum. This was because these places were the gates to the wilderness. They were also the sewage outlets that poured out the city's garbage, in various senses. At the same time, they were also the flow points of gray capital. Setting up a welfare home here was actually a very subtle matter. It was very easy for people to misunderstand. Those who knew the ropes would ask what the code of the dark web was. Those who were impatient would directly inquire about the price. But then again, even in the well-ordered South City District where the recycling stratum didn't exist, who knew how many crimes were hidden within the Santa Maria Charity Hall? From this aspect, Principal Juan Pagoda, overseeing the Lontown Welfare Home, had at least established a pure land. Luo Nan got off the car by the roadside outside the welfare home. Dean Juan, Papercut, and the kid Di Weiwu were waiting at the entrance. Beside them was worker Zhai, who was sitting upright and watching the rain. Worker Zhai's situation hadn't changed at all compared to what he had observed through the soul cloak. He was watching the rain, But he wasn't foolishly trying to see the rain as a flower. He had entered a state of selflessness, testing out his own ideas over and over again. That's right. Worker Zhai was endlessly sketching the condensation ring. He should have faintly discovered the subtle changes in the environment caused by the freezing rain. He hoped to borrow the interference scene constructed by the Soul Cloak to seize the opportunity to complete the condensation ring project. After all, the water molecules were sufficiently interfered with. They were exceptionally lively. It was different from being by the side of a pool or the surface of the sea. This pulsating rhythm was an extremely beneficial guide. Actually, the success rate of Worker Zhai's telepathic drawing was already extremely high. Occasionally, droplets of water would fly through the curtain of rain, showing the results of his hard work. However, these works were lacking by a thread compared to the semi-permanent structure Luo Nan spoke of, a stable carrier that carried the wonders of the interference between the mental and the material. This thread of difference was the most torturous. Since Luo Nan was the one who proposed the cultivation plan, he naturally had his own thoughts when faced with this situation. However, Papercut and Principal Juan Pagoda were both present, so he didn't act rashly. Instead, he asked for their opinions. The model you spoke of is reliable in theory, but it's lacking by a bit. Papercut also saw the doorway. He was a mental side awakened, so his general knowledge structure was much more solid than Luo Nan's. Today's environment is good, and my state is good. If I can't even do this, it will be too hurtful. Juan Pagoda said, although the material nature doesn't conflict, it isn't the best point of focus. What? Papercut didn't understand. Luo Nan understood. Dean Juan means that the condensation ring itself isn't too compatible with the nature of Worker Zhai's ability. You're talking about mutual promotion and restraint. Papercut and Gao Tianshi had a good relationship. They had been together for a long time, so Papercut was a bit affected. This description had a very traditional flavor to it. Juan Pagoda actually expressed his approval. It doesn't matter if it's metal, wood, water, fire, earth, or electromagnetism, heat, and other forms of expression. They are all just entry-level steps that lead to the ultimate material nature. However, everyone's temperament is different, and their sensitivity is different. Their directions should be different as well. Old Zhai's ability is electron affinity. Could it be that he needs the condensation ring? Papercut cracked a joke that wasn't really a joke. Her Majesty Empress Wu probably doesn't have any in stock. Actually, everyone understood that controlling water molecules and controlling electrons was not something that someone at Worker Zhai's level could reach. When all was said and done, this ring and that ring were just handrails. They needed a relatively stable support in the material world, allowing the illusory soul strength to function and multiply. Hearing their discussion, Di Weiwu, who had been listening to the heavenly book all this time, suddenly sighed with emotion. The mental side is so troublesome. I'll just read scriptures with the dean. Hey, Rue-1, what's your ability? That's right. This little mischievous fellow was sighing with emotion because he wanted to strike up a conversation with Rue-1. He wanted to probe her background. A new person had entered the orphanage without rhyme or reason. She was older than them by a head, and she was a backdoor entrant. He couldn't help but be curious. Unfortunately, Rue-1 remained silent. She just stood quietly by Luo Nan's side. Luo Nan wasn't interested in children's tricks. He observed Worker Zhai's work from a close distance during the course of their conversation. He came to a preliminary conclusion. Worker Zhai's work was much more meticulous than his when it came to the condensation ring. The overall structure outlined by Worker Zhai's soul strength manifested the rigor and precision of engineering drawings. Luo Nan could see that Worker Zhai's outline seemed to divide the condensation ring structure into many fulcrums and boundaries. Worker Zhai broke it down into blocks and steps that could be pieced together. Luo Nan was enlightened as he watched for a long time. He gained a deeper understanding of the subtle details of the interference between the mental and the material. This method was undoubtedly the most labor-saving and optimal solution. But behind the precision was an unsustainable predicament. Luo Nan would probably never be able to experience this sort of feeling. Luo Nan admired Worker Zhai's meticulousness, but the situation was different now. It would be too much of a waste of an opportunity. He thought for a moment and silently stepped forward. He abruptly bumped into Worker Zhai, interrupting Worker Zhai's state of oblivion. Worker Zhai was stunned for a moment. He turned his head to look and saw Luo Nan simply sit on the ground, ignoring the dampness. He took out the split-page notebook that rarely left his side and turned on the flexible e-ink screen and drawing software. Rays of light shot out and diffused outwards, reaching the boundaries of the notebook. Luo Nan chose the rarely used three-dimensional drawing mode. He didn't hesitate at all. He simply put his pen to paper in the work area. The structure of the condensation ring was like a smooth donut. The center was empty, and the overall rules weren't complicated. However, this sort of three-dimensional curved structure was extremely difficult to draw by hand, compared to forming it with one's thoughts. Smooth lines required considerable professional skill. Luo Nan and Worker Zhai both had this. Worker Zhai could see that Luo Nan's composition, lines, and so on were beautiful, but they weren't particularly precise. They were more like freehand strokes. It was undeniable that this method was exceptionally smooth. Soon, the projection area was filled with over a dozen similar structures. Luo Nan even turned on the animation effects, causing these donuts to flip back and forth. Then Luo Nan crooked his finger at Di Weiwu. "Come, Weiwu, I'll show you a magic trick." "Huh? Blow on these donuts. There'll be a surprise." "Are you trying to coax a child?" "If you don't come, I'll have your sister Rue Wen blow." "Tisage. A sister?" Di Weiwu was shocked. This was a situation he never imagined. He instinctively looked at Rue Wen's chest. Luo Nan flicked a raindrop with his finger, and it hit Di Weiwu on the forehead. "Are you gonna blow or not?" "Blow. Watch me blow your cowhide off." Even though Luo Nan said this, Di Weiwu still moved forward with great interest. He puffed his cheeks and fiercely blew on the painting area. It was at this moment that the dozen or so donuts in the work area seemed to be brushed by the airflow. They floated out from the bound light of the work area. They seemed to be stained with special light powder, and they transformed into glowing bubbles that changed shape and scattered outwards. "Wow, this is cool," Di Weiwu praised loudly. He was completely unaware of the difficulty of producing a similar scene. Luo Nan's method was inspired by the Order of Justice. Back then, the Order of Justice had used a projector to construct the structure of the sacred space. There was also the Myriad Towers. They had used a similar method to test Xie Junping and Du Yong's attainments in the mystic arts. Compared to the projector array, Luo Nan's method embodied the interference effect of soul strength turning the void into reality. His method of using interference strength to draw in light was even more breathtaking. Of course, the magic trick was just a gimmick. The true value of this method was revealed later. The glowing bubbles rapidly shrank at a visible rate. A small portion of them collapsed due to structural instability, but most of them shrunk to the point where it was hard to see with the naked eye. This was because the work area of the flexible screen was loaded with the glimmering energy of the glimmering screen. It released rays of light that were like the eye of a needle. 2 seconds later, these rays of light transformed into resplendent pearl-like light. This was because the structure of the condensation rings had successfully gathered water molecules. The water droplets refracted light. Chapter 519. This was all Luo Nan could do in regards to Worker Zhai's leap from 0 to 1 of the Dragon's Gate. Perhaps turning Worker Zhai into a member of his closed production line would greatly speed up the process, but what was the point of this pointless efficiency? Luo Nan patted Worker Zhai on the shoulder and stood up. After a slight hesitation, she stuffed the notebook in her hands into his hands. Perhaps the randomness of pure craftsmanship would help Worker Zhai struggle out of his excessive pursuit of precision. Worker Zhai raised his head and smiled at Luo Nan. He was not polite. He picked up the digital pen and began to draw up and down in the working area of the drawing software. Disregarding everything else, his body language was much more relaxed. Luo Nan shifted his gaze. "Brother Papercut, don't just sit around. You've also trained in the condensation ring. Come over and talk to Worker Zhai. Papercut had been looking at the translucent water droplets penetrating the curtain of rain in a daze. After he came to his senses, he spat. Only a ghost has ever practiced it. Cough. Even if he did, it would be for fun. Though he said this, he still came over obediently. He sat in Luonan's previous seat and watched Worker Zhai draw. At this moment, Di Weiwu had also recovered from the excitement of witnessing mental magic with his own eyes. His eyes were shining, and he had an expression that said, I don't understand it at all, but it's so interesting. Someone hurry up and teach me. However, he had just expressed his disdain for this sort of cultivation method. In the end, he didn't have the face to spit it out in a short amount of time. He simply made his way between his godfather and Papercut, staring closely at Luonan's loose-leaf notebook. He wanted to find a possible mechanism within it. Since the three of them were together, Luonan no longer disturbed them. He smiled at Dean Wanta and said, Let's go through the formalities. Luonan was talking about the continuation of Rue Wen's relationship transfer. Actually, it was more or less done in the administrative hall. Luonan was just saying this to give Worker Zhai some space and to chat with Dean Wanta. Forget about the procedures. I think what you should do now is to have a good sleep. Dean Wanta's words were almost the same as Qin Ikuan's advice in the car. Obviously, Luonan's exhausted appearance had reached the point where everyone could see it. At this moment, Qin Ikuan nodded at the side, expressing that Dean Wan's words had deeply resonated with him. Luonan grinned, but he didn't say much. He led Rue Wen inside. Wanta stopped persuading him and directly called the nanny of the orphanage to complete the last part of the procedures. It took a total of 5 minutes. At this time, Worker Zhai and the others had not made any breakthroughs. Luonan could not come and go in a hurry, so he stayed in the reception room and chatted with Wanta. Rue Wen sat quietly by Luonan's side. Qin Ikuan wandered around the room, appreciating the first-rate design effects. Luonan could not help but let out a yawn in the time it took to say a few words. A black tide surged before his eyes, and his mind grew more and more absent-minded. Just now, when he had helped Worker Zhai change his train of thought, he had boosted his spirit and gotten a little excited. Now that the excitement had passed, he felt even more tired. The Dean of Myriad Pagoda was making tea for Luonan and the others. She said leisurely when she saw this, forcibly going against the nature of matter is never pleasant. With such a heavy burden on you right now, once you suffer a backlash, the consequences will be even more serious. Luonan's eyelids twitched when he heard this, but he didn't completely open them in the end. It was also Wanta's fault. The reception room he designed had maximized the livability and comfort factor. Sitting on the old sofa, one's body would feel soft and unconsciously relaxed. But now was absolutely not the time for him to relax. He couldn't sleep no matter what. Right now, the entire world was watching Xia City. Countless ability users were rushing over. Since it was unknown whether Jin Tong was alive or dead, these people held quite a bit of wishful thinking. The more wishful thinking they were, the more dangerous it was. Luonan knew that he was walking on a tightrope, but he believed that his limit was far from being reached. Wait a bit more. Wait a bit more. Wait until a sufficient number of people came in, and they entered this large net woven by the freezing rain. The hexaear vibrated slightly, and Luonan's telepathy swept over. He was dazed for a moment before he confirmed the relevant information. It was the okay hand signal sent by the octopus. Luonan responded, Thanks, I'll go get it from you in a bit. Don't forget that this is Shangding. This short sentence displayed the grief and indignation of the researchers who had been forcibly transferred. Luonan laughed for a moment. Only then did he hear Wanta's voice enter his ears. The sensitivity of nerve cells to information will decrease under a state of suppression. If something goes wrong right now, it will be very hard for you to react. This isn't decided by the range of your senses. Luonan quivered. His eyelids completely opened as he looked at Wanta. This sentence was much more straightforward than the previous one. This leader of the Order of Creators clearly had a certain understanding of the current state of affairs. Moreover, he was aware of a deeper level of information. Luo Nan looked at Wan Ta. Qin Ikuan, who had turned to the corner of the reception room, cast a stunned gaze toward Luo Nan. The bodyguard also heard some clues from Wan Ta's words, but he still didn't dare to make a rash judgment. Wan Ta noticed the change in Qin Ikuan's expression. His brows slightly furrowed. Only now did he realize that Luo Nan's actions were actually hidden from even his own bodyguard. His previous words were a bit careless. Luo Nan laughed and sighed at this time. This is a helpless move. However, even you, Dean Wan, know about it. The speed at which news spreads is truly beyond imagination. Wan Ta laughed when he saw that Luo Nan didn't care. But his following words were a bit more conservative. The Starry Sky Club is the outer circle of the inner world. Relevant missions have indeed been posted, especially this morning. Information related to 16 billion and 2 out of 1,000 was posted all over the high-level mission area of the club. However, the Xia City branch should have already exerted pressure. They have already been cleaned up. Rui Wen raised her eyes from beside Luo Nan when he mentioned the words 2 out of 1,000. Her gaze streaked across Wan Ta's face. It was like an incorporeal strike that tore apart the light in the room. Then everything returned to normal. Wan Ta was a bit startled. Luo Nan followed up with a topic. Only on the surface, right? Yes, that's right. There should still be people on the internal dark network. People have sent out employment invitations to religious people like me. Wan Ta was magnanimous. He only treated this information as a topic of conversation. Could also be considered a reminder. Luo Nan actually already had a relevant concept. He Yuan had always been sending him relevant information, allowing him to have an intuitive understanding of the situation. Compared to this, he still wanted to discuss a more realistic problem with Wan Ta. It's inevitable that people will be restless. However, Dean Wan, is it really that easy to see through matters related to coverage? That's not true. Wan Ta was a researcher and preacher. He didn't have much interest in secular matters. Seeing that Luo Nan didn't mind, Wan Ta took the initiative to bring up relevant matters. Wan Ta turned to this domain. Pure interference on the microscopic level doesn't have much of an effect. Others might not be able to detect it. It's just that evil thoughts and killing intent are too much. This sort of negative emotion is like dust pollution. Oh, I'm sorry. It's just a general idea. I understand. Luo Nan nodded toward Wan Ta. They were talking about the condensation ring as the core of the soul cloak, which was the interference scene. It was also the substantial background of the freezing rain in Xia City. Luo Nan paid abnormal attention to the concealment of the soul cloak. This was because it involved not only his plans in Xia City, but also his goals in the cloud world. From last night until now, everything about this toy was good. The only thing lacking was its concealment. This made Luo Nan a bit worried. After all, he had used the soul cloak to monitor Gongqi for a long time in the cloud world. If the concealment was unreliable, then a considerable portion of the information he received over the past few days would be wrong. Luo Nan no longer cared about Qin Ikuan's thoughts. He followed Wan Ta's words and made some adjustments. Then he asked, "What about now?" Wan Ta shook his head. "Since I already know, there's no reason to overlook it. You and I may be in the lawful camp, but the orders we rely on are different. It's hard to avoid conflicting senses. As for the source, if you hadn't come personally, it would have been hard for me to lock onto it. This doesn't seem like your true core order. The binding force it gives off isn't that strong." "Yes, I mostly use it to sense and gather information." Luo Nan was a bit disappointed with the concealment of the soul cloak, but he had no other choice. He could only pay attention to it in the future. Then he sighed with emotion. It's convenient to use, but the pressure is a bit great. Luo Nan remembered what Peony had said to him during the incident at the municipal plaza. It was an enormous challenge for any psychic ability user to gather information from several 100,000 people at once. A bad move might even result in a backlash. Back then, Luo Nen used his unique clairvoyance mode to greatly reduce the relevant information. He extracted the essentials of the information and resolved this problem. The range of Luo Nan's mental senses, supported by the soul cloak, no longer covered the municipal plaza. It covered the vast expanse of Xia City and its surrounding regions. This was an enormous plate of information spanning nearly 100,000 square kilometers and over 200 million people. Even with the simplification and filtering effects of the life sketches, the enormous amount of information far exceeded the limits of what Luo Nan could handle. An unending supply of soul strength did not mean that there was no limit to the heart's strength. In fact, the heart's strength was rooted in the foundation of the human skeleton. The brain consumed energy at every moment, and at the same time it emitted waste heat. There was an upper limit to the operating speed of this low-end version of the biological computer. The source lay in the material structure of the brain. Even though Luo Nan's physical fitness was incomparable to the past, far exceeding that of an ordinary person, it was impossible for him to cover all aspects when faced with such an enormous flood of information. Right now, he could only abandon the vast majority of the information flow inside. He could only place the danger and stimulation range at the ability user level. At the same time, he set up a sentry post around his family members. This sort of defensive measure was enough to guard against enemies like Jin Tong and the 5-metal hunting group, who were accustomed to using extraordinary powers. However, He Yuan also gave him a warning. As the information spread, the various powers of capital would come up with more tricks. Perhaps they were far from having the direct destructive power of Jin Tong, but from a practical perspective, the methods of capital were more varied, more secretive, and more impossible to guard against. Luo Nan deeply believed in this, but the more this was so, the more it was impossible for him to abandon the structure of the soul cloak. He had thought of many ideas. He had already applied to President Ouyang to increase the privileges of the computing space, transferring a portion of the pressure to the supercomputer resources of the branch. However, this sort of method required a layer of transformation. It was only suitable for analysis and prediction. It was impossible to react in time when serious, unexpected situations truly occurred. Only Luo Nan himself truly understood the pressure he bore from last night until now. Other people were like Qin Ikuan, completely unaware of it, or they saw it as a matter of course. Her Majesty Empress Wu was a bit like this. It was rare for Wan Ta to be able to see his abilities and understand his difficulties. Luo Nan couldn't help but speak a few words to relieve the pressure. The results were pretty good. The previous wave of drowsiness had passed. Chatting with Wan Ta probably caused him to be distracted, allowing his suppressed cerebral cortex to get some rest. Nothing unexpected happened during this time. Did I use too much strength? Luo Nan was reflecting on himself. The problem was that even though he knew the flaws of this method, he had no other choice in order to ensure that nothing went wrong. Luo Nan sighed from the bottom of his heart and smiled at Wan Ta. Dean, you said that you would teach me the art of creation. Of course, he didn't want to learn it right now. He just wanted to start a new topic. However, Wan Ta's answer was unexpected. Right now, what you need isn't the art of creation. Wan Ta was silent for a full 5 seconds when he spoke to this point. Then he spoke softly. Are you interested in overall planning? Overall planning? Luo Nan subconsciously sat up straight. Though it wasn't a proper noun, its meaning was very clear when placed in the context of Wan Ta. This wasn't the first time he heard of it. Wan Ta was a bit surprised to see Luo Nan's reaction. You know about it? Oh, Junping told you about it? There's also Wei Wu. Whether it was Xie Junping or Di Wei Wu, both of them boasted about this ability to the point of being godly. Multitasking, all-seeing. It was as if learning this would allow one's IQ to easily break the charts. Speaking of which, if there was a drug that could increase one's IQ, no, it could increase one's information processing ability placed before Luo Nan's eyes, he would definitely swallow it in one gulp no matter what side effects it had. Therefore, Luo Nan's heart palpitated with excitement even though Wan Ta was just talking about it. But soon, he straightened out his attitude. After all, Xie Junping had said that if he wanted to reach the level of overall planning, he would need to go through 5 or 6 stages and spend 3 to 5 years of time. Even if the method was impressive, the threshold of time was there. It was useless if he couldn't cross it. Luonan laughed. My math grades are only average. He still held the attitude of chatting and chatting, but Wanta appeared very serious. Though overall planning is essentially an algorithm, we don't need to use mathematical logic to explain it. If there is a certain language or code, then it should be a signal from the brain itself. Really? Luonan blinked his eyes. Wanta really did turn serious. He gazed at Luonan. For the vast majority of people, learning this kind of code is like having an unreal dream. Because our consciousness has no way of sensing brain activity, we can only use logic, including experiments on our own bodies, to verify it one by one. But you are different. At least I believe you are. Are you referring to introspection? Is this a prerequisite? Luonan guessed. Wanta shook his head. You need to have the precision to touch the nervous system. This requirement is a bit high. But Luonan was completely capable of this. As a psychic ability user who was proficient in internal refinement, introspection wasn't difficult for him. And his many years of experience in drug modification had given him an extremely high sensitivity towards his own nervous system. He also possessed the corresponding understanding. And at this time, Luonan finally discovered that Wanta was undoubtedly communicating with him. It could be said that he was teaching a few things. The tea on the short table to the side was already cold, but no one remembered to change it. Let alone Luonan. Even Chin Ikuin couldn't help but prick up his ears. He wanted to see what this so-called overall planning theory looked like. Only Rui sat quietly on the sofa. She seemed to be listening, but she also seemed to be daydreaming. Her aura was faint, making people unconsciously ignore her existence. Wanta spoke softly. Right now, there is no harm in verifying it. You are also a professional researcher of the nervous system. The algorithm I proposed is based on a few basic facts. Please pay attention to whether or not it goes against your common sense. First, the brain possesses an extremely complex parallel structure. But most of the time, when a person perceives a meaningful and complete piece of information, it is established on top of a sequence of time. It will certainly display a sequential order. The meaning of these words was that the brain could only handle one meaningful task at a time. It could also be said that the same task often required the brain to utilize multiple functional areas in cooperation to complete it. This was something that had been proven by relevant research for many years. It was also a point that people criticized the human brain as an inferior biological computer. Luonan was able to see this from his biology textbook, so he immediately expressed his approval without hesitation. But then he thought of something else in the blink of an eye. Since this was the case, what was the meaning of multitasking? There was clearly a contradiction. Wanta didn't verify it a step further. He continued, second, depolarization will occur when a nerve cell is activated. During this time, the nerve cell will no longer receive new information. In other words, there is a gap between activation and inhibition. Yes, this is common sense. Dean Wanta sped up his speech. Third, the brain's reaction time is different for each level of input information. But in the end, there will certainly be an algorithm that encompasses everything, translating it into human language and habits of thought. Fourth, the integration and calculation process of external information mostly occurs in the deep waters that humans are unable to perceive. This is the direction and result of the evolution of the human brain. Luonan only thought for a moment before admitting that there was nothing wrong with this. This was all basic knowledge in the relevant field. Even if there were some disputes, it was still feasible to talk about it. Wanta smiled. You see, there is a division of labor, a gap, a difference, a direction, and a result. In this way, as long as one has the means of transformation, one can target one's own perception and thought, and follow a certain rhythm and a certain order to carry out dispatching, making it more efficient. This is all possible. Luonan slowly nodded his head, agreeing with this logic. Wanta summarized, on this basis, the meaning of overall coordination is to adjust the reception and reaction rate of each level of information during the time that humans can form effective responses. This is to reduce mutual interference as much as possible, yet it is necessary to integrate efficiently. Finally, it is unified at the highest level of thought. Luo Nen pondered seriously for a moment. He scratched his head and said, I roughly understand. Dean, what you mean is to grasp the rhythm of activation and inhibition of the nerve cell, to increase the level of information, to receive more information in the same amount of time. Oh, if the frequency of integration is increased, some perceptible thought processes may evolve into instincts. But this is a complete transformation of the brain's mental functions. Even if the large structure remains the same, how can the synaptic connections be added or deleted be in the billions? Even if the nervous system is extremely malleable, how can we grasp this direction and scale? Chapter 520. 4:10 in the afternoon, in a small room on the 7th floor of the Shangding building. Luo Nen sat on a recliner, slowly flipping through the information on the flexible screen in a leisurely manner. However, a sharp needle tube was connected to his wrist. It was through this channel that the relevant drug components entered his blood vessels in an unending stream. They passed through the blood circulation, broke through the blood-brain barrier, and acted upon the cerebral cortex. This component had no other effects. It just made Luo Nan's nerve cells more sensitive, helping these thoroughly tempered nerve structures to better absorb other drugs. Otherwise, even if Luo Nan was injected with a stimulant drug that exceeded the lethal dose of an ordinary person by 10 times, he would not be affected. This time, the infusion would last for nearly 6 hours. Only then could Luo Nan absorb the relevant stimulant drug for the next 2 to 3 days. This would guarantee his ability to maintain a conscious state. You're losing for 6 hours now, but you'll lose for 6 days later. The price is far too great. Speaking of which, President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu are looking after you. What are you worried about? It's useless to be worried. I'm taking the risk of becoming a drug dealer to help you. Don't you feel embarrassed if you don't give me a few molecular formulas? Brother Octopus, who had taken a temporary leave of absence from the laboratory, stood to the side. He seriously evaluated the dosage of the drug and the changes in Luo Nan's body. He couldn't help but shift his gaze as he mumbled to himself. He secretly sized up the seemingly well-behaved and quiet Miss 2000th. He couldn't help but mutter to himself, she's not some outstanding beauty. Is there a need to go through so much trouble? Could geniuses really be omnipotent? Could they see what this little girl would look like after she matured? If Luo Nan harbored such thoughts, then damn, a minimum of 3 years. Hold on. It seemed that Luo Nan was still in the so-called juvenile criminal protection period. The tricks of geniuses were too deep. Forgive Brother Octopus for learning from Luo Nan recently. He did more experiments on himself, and his train of thought became more and more bizarre. Then he saw Luo Nan open the working area of the drawing software and casually draw on it. It looked like he was drawing a half-sphere, layer after layer, nested layer after layer. It was like a simple and primitive nesting doll game. Qin Ikuin walked in at this time. He hesitated for a moment when he saw this scene, but he couldn't hold back. He said to Luo Nan, should we give Dean Wan's explanation to President Ouyang and Old Yu to study it? After all, it involves the modification of the nervous system and the risk is relatively high. I don't think President Wan has any intention of keeping it a secret. Qin Ikuin's words were not biased. When Wan Ta mentioned the overall plan in front of him, he did not intend to hide anything. But from another perspective, there were only a few people in Xia City who could put Wan Ta's theory into practice in a short period of time. As a bodyguard, Qin Ikuin was used to thinking of the worst possible situation. Let's not talk about what Wan Ta's intentions were. Just consider the objective situation. Putting this theory into practice in the nervous system might lead to damage to Luo Nan or even the other people's nervous systems. This would result in injuries. Considering the current complex situation in Xia City, it was not impossible for someone to come and destroy them. Luo Nan grunted. I've already sent a copy to President Ouyang. He said that it's very interesting. I can give it a try first. After some time, when he's done with his work, he'll personally verify it before communicating with Dean Wan. Qin Ikuin was speechless. Wasn't this what he was most worried about? At a time like this, vice president, he was indeed more trustworthy. It didn't matter that they were talking here, but Brother Octopus's curiosity was piqued. Hey, isn't there someone else here? What are you guys talking about? The research of the nervous system is also my field. Tell you and then add one more victim to the list of possible victims? Chin Ikuin just gave him a sideways glance when Luo Nan tapped the flexible screen interface. There's no harm in telling you. I just learned an applied theory from a very powerful fellow. That Dean Wan? That's right. Dean Wan calls it the overall plan. Luo Nan gave a general introduction. Brother Octopus's eyes lit up when he heard this. His main research direction was neurochemistry. The core theory isn't that amazing, but the application method is far too rare. If it really is useful, then wouldn't the calculation and judgment abilities of all ability users in the future be raised to a whole new level? Yeah. That's why I want to give it a try. This isn't something that can be done in a day or two. Oh, if it's you, then it really might be possible. Chin Ikuin wanted to strangle Octopus's neck right now, but Luo Nan's words caused his vision to darken. I'm already trying. Right now, I'm mainly performing decomposition and reconstruction on the perceptual plane. Octopus didn't look at the apparatus anymore. He came over and asked, "How is it?" There are a few overlapping areas, for example, the hippocampus. More attention needs to be paid to discrimination and layering. The response of the peripheral nerves is a bit larger. It's probably because the auditory and tactile senses share more brain regions. It also involves a portion of the spinal cord's functions. Only now did Chin Ikuin discover that Luo Nan's fingers were twitching a bit unconsciously. Looking closely, even his feet were the same. Luo Nan smiled when he noticed Chin Ikuin's gaze. He didn't mind at all. These are all controllable. Because everyone's situation is different, some adjustments need to be made to the details. Okay. As he spoke, the corresponding trembling slowed down and even disappeared. Octopus was excited. Wait a moment. Let me connect the brainwave analyzer. Do I need an MRI or something? Luo Nan shook his head. Not for now. I've recorded all the relevant data through the Hexa, but it's hard to say if it's universal or not. There's no other way. Geniuses are always different from mortals. What are you planning to do next? Let's do mental sensing. This isn't going through the functional organs, but it's an input of stimulation to the functional brain regions. Right now, my senses are mainly visual, but there's also a portion of primitive senses like dangerous stimuli. There's also a higher level part like the sensing of soul strength fluctuations. His words were quite abstract, but the actual difficulty was 100 times, 1,000 times higher. For a normal person, just the mechanism of vision alone involved over 30 functional brain regions. Hearing, touch, smell, and taste were a bit simpler, but most of them had over 10. These regions were distributed in various parts of the brain. They each formed an image and interconnected with each other to form a marvelous topological diagram. If he really had to ponder over how to reorganize and reconstruct these regions, it would be like controlling several dozen or 100 fierce horses at the same time. Not only would he have to divert them to different levels and directions, he would also have to avoid them clashing with each other and pulling him back. Just thinking about it was enough to make a person collapse. Thanks to Wanta, what he provided wasn't a simple theory. Instead, it was a complete system that could be followed and compared. It was the same as taking out a clear engineering blueprint. As long as one had basic professional knowledge, it was fine to follow it. Even if one didn't know the reason for it in a short time, it was fine to imitate it. And it was because of this that Chin Ikuin's worries were normal in a certain sense. Luo Nan's method was both complicated and dangerous. Wanta also said that normal cultivation shouldn't be like this. Xie Junping and the others had smoother methods to help them carry out the gradual division, reorganization, and other processes in order to suit the normal development and metabolic rhythm of the brain. Luo Nan directly set out to transform and straighten. It was no different from a complex brain surgery that didn't require a craniotomy. The risk factor soared, but it wasn't to the extent of being radical. In fact, Luo Nan's nervous system had undergone at least 2 large-scale transformations. The first time was also the most fundamental. It was when he was between the ages of 10 to 15. He followed his grandfather's notes and carried out experiments on the basic container of formatting theory. This process of drug transformation spanned 5 years. It used an extremely dangerous and extremely cruel method to completely transform Luo Nan's nervous system and physiological foundation. It opened up a heavenly ladder from the material plane to the mental world. It was during this process of transformation that Luo Nan's neural network, which covered his entire body, possessed a high degree of plasticity. The second transformation was when Luo Nan learned from Gym Master Xiao. He came into contact with the internal training method and carried out the cultivation of the 9 orifices and 6 roots technique on this foundation. Of course, there was also a main axis of coupling. This included the actual combat strengthening of his Sanzhou training. This transformation was very short compared to the 5-year process of drug transformation. But it systematically fed back the accumulation of Luo Nan's mental domain to his fleshly body. While strengthening his body, it formed the most revered basic modes of the external 3 harmonies and the internal 3 harmonies in traditional martial arts theory. This allowed Luo Nan to make accurate and efficient responses to external stimuli. It could be said that the growth and development of Luo Nan's neural network and its further expansion and shaping were all on a relatively correct and extremely high path. This foundation was something that Xie Junping, Du Yong, and the other beginner cultivators were unable to reach. Even the vast majority of ability users who had already entered the sect and possessed certain accomplishments were unable to reach. Luo Nan's nervous system was the most complete and perfect building material for plasticity. The corresponding optimization and transformation of the nervous system was just like building blocks. Changing parts of the structural relationships could be reversed at any time. In other words, all he needed to do was erase the newly added synaptic connections and extinguish the corresponding neuronal activation resonance frequency. There was no need to doubt that Luo Nan had this ability. Therefore, when he understood the theoretical foundation of overall planning, all he needed to do was to take the good habits and patterns he had formed in the past. He needed to carry out a simple combing according to the requirements of this theory. He needed to reduce the mutual interference and interference between brain regions to the lowest level. Then he sealed them layer by layer and placed them into the most suitable level and position. He sank them into the deepest depths of the iceberg of the subconscious. Only then did he carry out a higher-level secondary coding. He transformed the reasoning that originally required the participation of subjective consciousness into a kind of intuition and instantaneous judgment. The workload of the brain didn't actually decrease during this process, but it was able to form the most competitive supply chain. It crushed the primitive, unconscious, and inefficient modes of thought. Octopus appeared to be a mad scientist, but he was actually quite cautious in nature. Seeing that Luo Nan hadn't spoken for some time, he became a bit nervous. "How do you feel right now? How are you compared to before?" Luo Nan shook his head slightly. "I can't tell for now. After all, I've learned the 9 orifices 6 roots technique from Gym Master Xiao. I've already reached the pinnacle of perceiving order. It'll be hard for me to make any clear breakthroughs in a short period of time. And I need to redo logic programming for deeper calculations. I want Brother Bamboo Pole to help me do some calculations and verification. At the very least, I need to understand the internal logic within." Octopus gave him a thumbs up. "You have a clear train of thought." Luo Nan sighed. "It's not my train of thought. Truth be told, everything else about Dean Wan is good. It's just that the materialism of cultivation is really awkward. If I don't change it a bit, my brain will be in a mess." Chapter 521. The core of Vanta's theory was based on materialism. From his perspective, even if it was a spiritual ability user's out-of-body phenomenon, it was still nothing more than a projection of the human body's energy structure in the material world. As for the current state of the spiritual plane, it could be explained by the theory of the higher dimensional world. Regardless of who was right and who was wrong, Luo Nan's brain would be screwed if he accepted the complex theories of 2 systems at the same time. Luo Nan could only make adjustments according to his own actual circumstances. Octopus expressed his support. Just ask Bamboo Pole for help. This guy has a deep understanding of neural network algorithms. I usually ask him for help when I'm making models. Of course, Mr. Luo, please don't forget about me. When I write my thesis, I don't have time to write a thesis. After the transfer is over, I'll definitely have time. Otherwise, what are the 8 tentacles of an octopus for? Well, let's not talk about being the corresponding author or the first author. I'd even accept the title of the second author. Luo Nen chuckled twice and his mind relaxed quite a bit. Octopus continued to ponder over the overall planning theory and clicked his tongue. This Dean Wan is also an interesting person. It's obviously his special skill, but he said he would teach it all at once? I didn't. Qin Ikuan witnessed Wan Ta teaching such a profound and complicated technique with his own eyes. The pressure was immense and he felt as if his brain was half disabled. Since he had listened from the beginning to the end, he knew the difference. That person only told me the result directly, saying that it was enough for Mr. Luo to know this. He only mentioned a few words about the complicated ritual to advance from the basic level to the advanced level. That is something unique to their sect. Octopus instantly understood. I've given you the blueprint and asked you to reverse it. Actually, it's more or less the same. I think there's a big difference. No difference, no difference. As long as you have the answer, you can try a few more times. Qin Ikuan couldn't help but want to sigh. Someone quickly come and control this bunch of Frankenstein monsters who didn't take their lives seriously. Before he could finish sighing, the door to the room opened and someone else walked in. The room, which was not very spacious to begin with, became even more cramped with 5 people and equipment. When Qin Ikuan and Brother Octopus saw him, they both greeted him, Vice President. Luonan frowned. Sister Yuan, are you okay? Yuan, who came in, was dressed simply and neatly. However, on her right cheek, there was a twisted scar caused by lightning. It was the mark left behind when she fought with Jin Tong in the morning. Who knew how long it would take for it to recover to its original state? Yuan didn't care too much about her appearance. She only nodded. I'm fine. Her gaze swept over Rue One, who was sitting quietly. She immediately switched to the main topic. The list of all ability users who have entered or are planning to enter Xia City has been updated. The number of C-class and above personnel had already exceeded 200, and they would arrive in the next 1 to 2 days. According to the estimates of the intelligence company, there are at least twice as many people who are still observing the situation. Luonan blinked his eyes, allowing his thoughts to enter the real world from laboratory mode. It's a bit less than I imagined. Luonan subconsciously erased the hemispherical structure on the flexible screen as he spoke. His brush fell straight to the ground, dividing the work into 2 parts. In his opinion, this represented the classification of the enemies he was currently facing. He wrote 200 on the left side, circled it, and drew a cross in passing. This action was nothing in the eyes of others, but Qin Ikuan, Luonan's personal bodyguard, had a belly full of subtle information from the conversation between Luonan and Dean Wan Ta. He was at a sensitive time, and his eyelids twitched when he saw this. Luonan muttered to himself, These are the guys who are tempted and have a lot of motivation. They are driven by their desires. They come as they please. The most typical example is Jin Tong. Are there many extraordinaries like Jin Tong? Yuan said calmly, There are quite a few, but after this morning's battle, President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu will form a certain deterrent force. Those people will be more cautious and observe before confirming the news of Jin Tong's death. In addition, President Ouyang is urging headquarters to pass a resolution opposing Jin Tong's actions of attacking a member of the society. He also requests the relevant parties of the inner world to boycott the rewards, missions, and so on related to the so-called 2000th. Octopus couldn't help but interject, How could headquarters let the agreement pass? But they can make their respective standpoints clear. Let everyone stand on the front stage. Is it convenient to take precautions? Want to start a war? Yuan didn't respond this time. Luonan casually moved his pen and scribbled on the other side of the blank space. There's also a part of them. They are the major powers and capitals. In other words, they are orders and financial groups. They also have desires, but they are a bit more abstract. They are considerations of benefits. For the time being, I believe that they will be a bit more rational. At the very least, they will make some risk assessments. There was a hidden meaning in his words. It was true that this part of the threat was more rational, but their infiltration into modern society was pervasive. There were many people who were completely unaware of the 16 billion and the 2000th. They would be driven by these powers and cause trouble for Luonan. Even if the news of Jin Tong's death was announced to the public right now, it would at most restrain the first group of stragglers who were driven by desires. As for the large-scale powers, they were large in size and had high sights. They considered the profits of a few years or a few decades later. The death of one or two extraordinaries did not hurt them at all. Perhaps from their perspective, it would be best for the society's internal members and even the entire inner world to beat the brains out of these people. This would be the most beneficial for them in the long run. The various secret orders basically act according to the rules of the inner world. And a portion of the officials don't wish for too many elements of the inner world to be mixed into their projects. From the looks of things, the majority of the powers of the secret orders are still watching from the sidelines. Yuan analyzed softly. She reminded Luonan once more. It's just that threats don't have much effect when it comes to capital, especially when they see the huge profits. Capital has its own will, but in most cases it doesn't move according to the will of an individual. Octopus was a bit more acerbic. In comparison, politicians are more principled than them. Of course, most of the time there are illicit relationships on both sides, vile spawns. Luonan looked at the drawing interface. His gaze was fixed on it, but his thoughts were drifting far away. Even so, we can't do nothing before we find a more effective method. From his perspective, it was impossible to chop off the brains of capital. However, if he were to destroy the tools and other means of production of capital, the situation might have changed by then. In other words, he had to take the initiative to change the current situation. He had to break this damned balance. And he had to tilt it in a direction that was advantageous to him. This required a more accurate, more powerful attack. Luonan was preparing for this. Brother Octopus reminded them at this time, I'm starting to add ingredients. Why don't you guys slow down and keep quiet? Yuan heard this and said, I won't disturb you guys anymore. You guys can continue. She gave a slight greeting to everyone in the room as she spoke, pushed open the door, and left. Qin Ikuan's mind was a bit stupefied. He remembered that he had already reported the relevant situation. With Yuan's rational personality, she should have at least given a few words of advice regarding Luonan's actions. Right? But what was happening right now? Oh, there was quite a bit of tacit understanding between them. Qin Ikuan furrowed his brows in contemplation. His heart grew more and more apprehensive. Luonan closed his eyes on the recliner. He experienced the familiar yet unfamiliar feeling of the stimulant drug composition seeping into his neurons. It was familiar because this situation had been repeated several thousand times over the past 5 years. It was unfamiliar because his foundational vessel had successfully advanced into the My Heart's a Prison format. This was the first time he had truly received the stimulant effects of such a taboo drug. After several months of cultivation, his grasp of his body and mind was far from what it was 2 months ago. It was just as Dean Wan had said. The self-awareness of an ordinary person was actually excluded from the foundational operation of the brain. But at this time, Luonan could truly feel the precise yet rough, strict, and random natural operation pattern of his brain. This was a warm, moist, marvelous domain that could create miracles at any time, yet it was overgrown with weeds. Luonan hadn't actually changed too much with the entry of the logic of overall planning. However, his understanding of this domain was completely different now that he looked within himself. It was like learning ancient literature. He looked at the densely packed uncommon characters, the polysemous characters, the phonetic characters, and the awkward syntax. It was hard to think of the image, hard to decipher the meaning. Everything was chaotic and chaotic when he skimmed over it. But when you really compared the exegesis and annotations, successfully read and memorized it, you could at least have an idea of the structure, the grammar, and the derivation of the branches and tendrils of the text. Overall planning was a work of exegesis on the logic of the brain's functional functions. Even if it was just the words of one school, the meaning was clear and unobstructed. Just by looking at the method, Luo Nan naturally knew where the most important and crucial parts of the text were. There were also some unfinished meanings within that needed to be studied diligently in the future to seek a deeper understanding. This kind of directional pointer was truly rare and exquisite. Luo Nan carried out deductions according to the theory of overall planning. He sorted out the difficulties within one by one, preparing to clarify and express it to bamboo pole in order to form a complete model. Of course, he could also seek guidance from President Ouyang and Wan Ta. Luo Nan engraved these sluggish nodes in his mind. The number gradually increased, and it was hard for Luo Nan to avoid further pondering and pondering. He sought to make the connections within smooth and clear. At the same time, his cerebral cortex was exceptionally active due to the stimulant drug composition. Some fantastic ideas, whether they were illusions or inspirations, were actually random splicing and combinations of relevant information. They were mapped onto the plane of his consciousness, changing in a myriad of colors. But Luo Nan knew that this state was a precursor to losing control of his mind. He immediately prepared to collect his mind and suppress it. But Luo Nan never truly calmed his mind. These chaotic thoughts and thoughts were naturally divided, categorized, eliminated, and cancelled. A considerable portion of the meaningless deformations were eliminated. This, the elementary logical model of thought of overall planning, seemed to have unwittingly formed an embryonic form. Before he could finish his thought, a ray of light suddenly leaped in his mind. It was not a flash of inspiration, but lightning. Lightning suddenly radiated in all directions from the depths of his brain. It wandered and weaved in and out. In that instant, it was as if a layer of stricter outer membrane had been plated over this region that had just seen the law for the first time. Chapter 522. Electricity flickered and instantly filled his brain. Such a scene stirred Luo Nan's mind. He wanted to defend, but he didn't know where to start. His body went stiff by instinct. He only let out a sigh of relief when he discovered that the electricity did not penetrate the material plane. But a problem followed. The external neuron. What the hell was going on? Hey! Don't let your imagination run wild. Don't scare people. Brother Octopus slapped Luo Nan on the shoulder. Luo Nan's brain waves fluctuated violently from 2 seconds ago. It nearly made Brother Octopus believe that the drug ingredients had accidentally injured some of his nerves. He broke into a cold sweat on the spot. Luo Nan composed himself and raised his hand in apology. I'm sorry. It might be a stress reaction. Let me adjust a bit. Actually, Luo Nan didn't even know what he said. Right now his brain was filled with the external neuron, but he was completely clueless. How could he calm down for a time? Are you sure you're fine? Octopus was skeptical. He moved closer to the integrated interface of the device and looked at a few key pieces of data. He carefully considered the next dose. No! I'm really fine. Luo Nan suddenly shivered. He shifted his gaze following this feeling and saw Rue when staring at him. Her pupils were deep. It was impossible to tell whether it was curiosity, concern, or pure observation. Though the abnormal activity of the external neuron did not affect Luo Nan's brain tissues, it seemed to have caused some effects within Luo Nan's sealed system. Rue 1 was temporarily residing within the sealed system. Naturally, she could sense it. And since it existed in the form of the condensation ring, it was the core link of the entire soul cloak. The corresponding fluctuations swept past all of Luo Nan's current monitoring regions. Fortunately, the electricity of the external neuron was withdrawn as soon as it was released. It swept past the depths of Luo Nan's polar domain. Even though there were some slight vibrations and effects, they were transmitted through the layers of mental curtains. By the time it permeated into Luo Nan's polar domain, it was already weak to the point where it was hard for Luo Nan to detect it. It didn't cause any effects to the outside world. Ever since he took the external neuron out of the flexible screen and allowed it to see the light of day once more, it had never been this agitated aside from the early active charging phase. What was the reason for this? Luo Nan's eyebrows jumped. He really wanted to immediately pull that thing out and size it up before his eyes. But he also knew that he was in front of people, and he was in the middle of injecting the drug. Both inside and outside were under the monitoring of the device. It wasn't a good time to investigate in detail. After thinking about it for a while, he forced his eyes shut. However, the drowsiness had long been crushed by the medicine. Under his slightly trembling eyelids, it was even more difficult for him to calm down. Left with no other choice, he could only silently recite the 16 words of "My Heart's a Prison," and combine it with the internal training technique taught by Gym Master Shio to forcefully calm his emotions and enter a meditative state. The cultivation during this period of time was still useful. About a minute later, he gradually calmed down and entered a semi-meditative state. The external neuron didn't go haywire again. Just like most of the time, it fell into a long period of standby. Time passed quickly. When Luo Nan opened his eyes again, he was woken up by Octopus's slap. In reality, Octopus's palm was still 10 centimeters away from his shoulder when Luo Nan raised his eyes. This gave Octopus a fright. "How did you sleep?" "I didn't sleep." Luo Nan spoke the truth. He was in a semi-meditative state, but his perception of the outside world remained sharp. He stared extremely closely at the vast surroundings that were covered by the soul cloak. Instead, he ignored the area around his body, whether intentionally or unintentionally. He indirectly ignored the meaning of himself. It was as if he was dreaming a wanton flowing dream. This was a small technique he had learned without a teacher from the theory of overall planning. It allowed a portion of the cerebral cortex to obtain rest. Under the general background of the strong stimulation of the entire cerebral cortex by the medicine, this sort of rest was even more rare and precious. Luo Nan couldn't care less about this small improvement right now. He waited for the infusion time to end, and several monitoring instruments left his body. He immediately focused his mind into the depths of his brain and locked onto the external neuron. However, 3 hours passed, and the brilliant light that flickered on the plane of nothingness didn't show any visible changes. It still existed in the state of the condensation ring. It hung in the void of his brain where the material plane and the mental plane intersected. Luo Nan pondered for a moment, and he suddenly came to a realization. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the loose-leaf notebook in his hand. His consciousness wasn't idle either. He brought up the system interface corresponding to the external neuron. Then he saw the gray icon of the visualization diagram on the main interface, which had been stagnant for 2 months. There was a slight change in brightness now. When Luo Nan's consciousness concentrated, the icon's download progress had already silently risen by a chunk. It went from a seemingly unchanging 99% to 5%. Should he express his happiness? Actually, this wasn't the most eye-catching change on the interface. What was truly eye-catching was that a new icon had appeared on the side of the gray visualization diagram. It was a complete structure made up of complex yet clear lines. It was a simplified diagram of the outline of the human brain. The entire diagram appeared to be in a transparent state, with only clear and distinct lines filling in the gaps of the inner region of the diagram. A few specks of star-like burning points dotted the gaps. There were also lines connecting them. At first glance, it looked very much like an ancient constellation diagram. It also looked a bit like the life sketches that Luo Nan's consciousness described. The most important thing was that this virtual brain icon was colored. The bright white lines displayed information that was completely different from the gray icon next to it. This app was already in the download complete state. Could be opened at any time. Octopus waved his hand in front of Luo Nan's eyes. "You're fine, right? Get up and walk a few steps?" Luo Nan shook his head. He didn't say anything and closed his eyes again. He didn't care about anything else. He just poured his thoughts into the virtual brain icon. The interface opened in an instant. In an instant, The scene of deep space filled his senses. Since it was on the mental plane, the feeling was more intense than any special effects blockbuster. It had already reached or even surpassed the effects of virtual reality. Luo Nen felt as if he had instantly fallen into the empty outer space. The specks of starlight dotted the extreme distance, further fueling his feeling of nothingness and weightlessness. This feeling wasn't bad, but the warning pop-up window hurt the atmosphere. Especially in a situation where he couldn't understand it at all. A translucent panel suddenly appeared in front of him. Complex yet orderly words appeared on the panel. It was called words because it clearly had the special structural rules of hieroglyphics. Moreover, the rules were strict. It clearly possessed some sort of writing standard. But Luo Nan didn't recognize a single word of the rules, and the standards. At best, he had a few guesses about some of the structures. He was a bit familiar. For example, the only options on the panel were probably confirm, agree, or continue and the like. Luo Nan stared blankly at this panel for a few seconds. Countless seemingly reasonable yet absurd thoughts flashed through his mind. His thoughts subconsciously touched it again, and the panel immediately disappeared. His point of view also changed. A virtual brain icon similar to the app icon appeared in the starry sky. Under the contrast of the scenery in outer space, the virtual brain's first impression was that it was a half-transparent planet. The star map that included it had become much more complicated, too. There seemed to be some indescribable mysteries hidden in it. This virtual brain planet rotated noiselessly in deep space. As it rotated, Luo Nen saw a satellite orbiting it. It wasn't a satellite. At least it didn't look like one. It should be a spaceship in outer space. Its volume was about 1/10 the size of the virtual brain. Its overall lines appeared very slender and graceful. It had a pleasing design. It was like a high-level spaceship that could roam in outer space. Luo Nan wasn't a military enthusiast, but he knew that only the Earth's aerospace forces could equip a spaceship like this. Only super-rich people who liked to roam in outer space would purchase one. Why did this toy suddenly appear? Couldn't be a spaceship design game, right? Another orbiting satellite appeared before he could finish his thought. Luo Nen looked at the pitch-black exoskeleton armor and turned around. Let's not talk about its design. Just by looking at its volume, it was only slightly smaller than a spaceship in the entire interface. It felt supermassive. It gave off an awkward feeling of discordant proportions. Only now did he suddenly realize something. Don't say that it was discordant. In the end, this was just an app. It was some sort of UI interface. Perhaps this app was similar to the observation platform on Gear's side. It was also a control center. Logically speaking, it controlled two resources. One was the exoskeleton, and the other was the spaceship in outer space. What the hell? Luo Nan had never seen this sort of exoskeleton armor before. He had never seen this sort of spaceship either. There was absolutely no such thing in his surroundings. He probingly touched it with his telepathic thoughts. A clear feeling of sluggishness was fed back, allowing Luo Nan to probe a step further. The two satellites were both in an unreadable state. Alright, this was quite reasonable. Luo Nan turned his telepathic thoughts to the central virtual brain planet. This time there was a response. Another translucent pop-up window popped out. It was still a paragraph of unintelligible text. But this time, two options appeared below the text. The form was quite clear. One was the selected state. The other was the unselected state. Luo Nan had often seen these sorts of options using normal logic. There was a high probability of one being yes and one being no. The question was, what was it? What was it that was no? Though the interface gave him options, Luo Nan didn't have much leeway to choose. At best, he could flip a coin. Oh, he could also decide whether to choose now or to choose later. Luo Nan chose the latter. After all, now wasn't the best time to delve deeper. He had been in a daze for far too long. Octopus already wanted to put a new device on him. I'm fine. If you're fine, then why are you fainting? Who's fainting? Doesn't internal vision take time? A machine might crash when it does a self-examination, let alone the nervous system. Luo Nen stood up and moved his waist and legs a bit. He didn't see any changes, except for the brand new human-computer interface that had already been engraved into his brain. Qin Ikuin raised his hand to indicate to him at this time. On his hand was the wristband that Luo Nan had taken off before injecting the drug. This toy buzzed and vibrated. The caller displayed was none other than Emoya. Chapter 523. The jeep slid down the street without a sound. It made a slight turn and entered a temporary parking space on the side of the street. It just so happened to exhaust its kinetic energy and stop. The lights inside the jeep lit up, illuminating the 5 people packed to the brim. Aside from the fixed group of Luo Nan, Rue 1, Qin Ikuin, and Gao De, there was another person in the front passenger seat. This person was also a familiar face, Cat Eyes. She had temporarily joined the security team at Luo Nan's request. Nominally, it was to make it easier to look after Rue 1. In reality, it really was like this. It was just that there was a hidden condition, to better conceal some of Rue 1's peculiarities, especially during the time when Luo Nan and she were temporarily separated. Of course, Cat Eyes' own investigative abilities were well known in the Xia City branch. She absolutely had the qualifications to join the security team. Qin Ikuin and Gao De had no objections. Mr. Luo, don't worry. We will look after Rue 1 well. Qin Ikuin displayed his usual sense of responsibility. Cat Eyes, who was truly in charge of this matter, curled her lips. Okay. Luo Nan thought of the scene of Rue 1 killing Jin Tong in one strike when he said these words. Frankly speaking, it was quite difficult to look after a girl who could flash several hundred kilometers away at any time. Luo Nan revealed a smiling face to the girl beside him. Rue 1? Rue 1, who was sitting upright by the window, withdrew her gaze that was cast deep into the night sky. She looked back, her gaze clear, quiet, and silent. It had already been 24 hours since last night, and she had spoken no more than 5 sentences. She felt that she was even more reticent than she was in the underground fighting arena. Luo Nan didn't mind. He spoke in a low voice. We need to separate for a while. If you need anything, you can tell me at any time. You have the wristband and the hexa ear. My contact information is on them. If you really can't do it, you can come personally. See that road outside? Follow it straight ahead. My house is around 400 meters away. As long as Rue 1 had a clear location, she could come to his house as a guest in the blink of an eye. However, Qin Ikuin didn't have a perceptual understanding of Rue 1's abilities. He just thought that Luo Nan was worried that Rue 1 wasn't used to being alone. He said, Our surveillance point is nearby. It's an independent apartment. The environment is pretty good. Cat Eyes had been called to work overtime at the last minute. She still had a belly full of resentment right now. She couldn't help but mock and ridicule in her words. I see that Rue 1 is quite easy. Luo Nan glared at her, but in the end he didn't retort. Luo Nan closed the car door with a slight bang and walked into the community. Just as he said to Rue 1, he would reach home in a few hundred meters. In the past, it was a place to rest and relax. In order to maintain this most precious function in the future, he now had to face challenges. Luo Nan exercised his facial muscles a bit and permeated his soul strength into the hexa ear. He opened a document within the cloud storage space. This was the magic weapon that Luo Nan used to fool his family. He discovered that Emoya had already sensed some inklings in the afternoon, so he specifically asked He Yueyin to help him make it. Officer He's move was indeed extraordinary. There were approximately a dozen or so pages of relevant documents. 4 plans were listed for Luo Nan to choose from. Each plan was detailed and thorough. Even the steps and the corresponding explanations were listed. It was precisely because of this proposal document that Luo Nan's wishful thinking stopped. Otherwise, he really would have dared to directly bring Rue 1 back home. No matter how the situation developed, perhaps there would be no leeway to turn things around. Luo Nan had already read through the proposal in detail many times. He had made a preliminary choice. However, Yuan bluntly stated at the beginning of the proposal, "No proposal is perfect. If you want to convince and hide it from these two elders who already have their own views, then it will be a test of your ability to adapt to the situation." The problem was that adaptability had never been Luo Nan's strong suit. Luo Nan sighed. He confirmed that the document in the cloud was kept open from beginning to end. He thought for a bit and opened a group chat window. He chose to share the view and typed a line of words inside. "If there's any unexpected situation, you guys help me handle it." Cat Eyes was the first to reply. "It's rare to have such self-awareness. Things need to be done in the front. Otherwise, people will have to clean up after you." "Then what are you cleaning up in the front?" The veteran train driver's bamboo pole spirit appeared in a flash. He pulled out a string of 666,666. It could be said that practically everyone in this friend group exploded. Relax, relax. Take deep breaths. Clench your teeth. Shrink your anus and lift your hips. After a long string of messages, someone finally broke the group. "Don't forget to start with 3 years, cat eyes." Luo Nan walked into the courtyard of his home under the noisy background of the friend group. The AI housekeeper detected his existence through a sensor and timely said, "Luo Nan, after 38 hours, welcome home." Luo Nan's eyelids twitched. They just changed it. Who used this setting? Ding dong. Our philanthropist is back. Emoya greeted him from the living room as Luo Nan entered the house to change his shoes. The outside of the house was freezing cold, but the inside of the house was as warm as spring. Emoya dressed very casually at home. She wore a loose striped casual outfit, and then she played with the style of not wearing anything underneath. Her snow-white long legs were practically completely exposed. She lay on the sofa with her long legs resting on the armrest of the sofa. She even used a knife to cut apples and sent them piece by piece into her mouth. She looked quite carefree. Oh, the welfare. Boss Luo, I remember that your sister is still single right now. Do you mind if I join the group of pursuers?" A notification popped up in the group. "Bamboo pole has been muted by Administrator Luo Nan for 1 minute." Luo Nan's gaze turned to the bottom of the sofa after completing the operation. He looked at Mo Peng, who had a bitter expression on his face as he supported himself with a tablet. It was clear that this little fatty had no choice but to succumb to his sister's tyrannical power. He was almost at his limit right now. Not only was he drenched in sweat, but his butt was almost over the sofa. Then Emoya kicked him down without a trace of politeness. "Oh my God. Keep going. You dared to sell my private photos. Why don't you go to heaven?" Mo Peng lay on the carpet like a pig looking for death. He wouldn't budge no matter what. He even bickered with his sister. "That's not selling. That's just gifting. Then there's reciprocation. This is how friendships develop. Luo Nan, you be the judge. I've already stressed it 100 times. That's a girl, a girl, a girl. Emoya still won't let it go. Speaking of which, what are you afraid of?" "Ha ha ha ha. This little fatty is quite cute. Ying, do you want him?" Bamboo pole was muted by Administrator Zhang Ying for 10 minutes. Luo Nan's nerves had been stretched taut like a bow, but now he had to loosen up. Plus, he didn't have to face his aunt and uncle right away. This made him feel a bit relaxed. Luo Nan sat on the sofa and let out a breath. He asked despite knowing the answer, "Where's Aunt and the others?" Emoya finished eating the apple and threw the core into the trash can. She played with the fruit knife in her hand. She responded lazily, "They're in the study upstairs. They're having a board of directors meeting right now. They'll have a staff meeting after they've decided on a plan." Mo Peng secretly crawled a bit further away. He pulled some distance from Emoya and used Luo Nan as a shield. Only then did he struggle to get up. He panted as he leaned against Luo Nan's side and asked, "I say, I heard that your love exploded. In order to take care of a street kid, you accompanied him to the orphanage for an entire night?" "Yeah. I never saw it before. Speaking of which, is it a boy or a girl? You don't have any ideas, right?" Yeah, we want to know too." A group of friends randomly entered the group. Luo Nen rolled his eyes. Fortunately, he didn't need to exhaust his brain power for this sort of senseless matter. He knew that the two elders had already come downstairs after hearing the AI housekeeper's report. His aunt's voice came from the staircase in the next moment. "How come you're back so late?" It was the same sort of concern that seemed normal, but Luo Nen raised his spirits. He told his first lie of the night in earnest. "I finished helping that child with the procedures, and then I invited a few helper friends to a meal." The two elders walked into the living room as they spoke and sat on the sofa. The semicircular sofa layout just happened to accommodate a family of 5. The atmosphere of a family meeting was immediately present. As the head of the family, Mo Haihang gave Luo Nen a few words of advice. "The state of emergency hasn't been lifted yet. Don't take it lightly. This sort of vicious incident where over 100 people died in a single night is rarely seen in the entire world, let alone Xia City. If I didn't hear from Moya that your friends are professional security circles, your aunt would have gone outside to bring you back." Luo Nen responded obediently and took the opportunity to explain a few words, laying the groundwork. "After I learned martial arts from Gym Master Xiao, I entered that circle. Many of my peers are in the security industry. Their personalities aren't bad." Moya occupied the sofa all by herself. She felt quite uncomfortable. Luo Shuqing glared at her, but Moya pretended not to see it. She spoke lazily. "You've entered the circle. Let's not talk about other things, but you've done things more efficiently. You've learned the skill of acting first and reporting later. Aren't you going to explain it to everyone?" "You're talking about Rue 1? Luo Nen lied with his eyes wide open. "I'm just helping her with the procedures and giving her a legal identity." "What do you mean acting first and reporting later?" "Of course, it would be better if I could help her to the end." Moya laughed. "How do you want to help her? That kid is really pitiful, but there are millions and millions of vagrants in the world. Are you going to help all of them?" Moya was doubtful from beginning to end, but she was actually paving the way for Luo Nen with every word. She saved Luo Nen the unnecessary explanation and made it easier for Luo Nen to get straight to the point. Luo Nen licked his lips. He secretly thanked Moya and took this opportunity. "Rue 1 isn't a vagrant." His words set the tone. Luo Nen stood up and walked over to Mrs. Luo Shuqing's side with the loose-leaf notebook. He flipped to the flexible screen page and lit up the interface. He turned on the player and spoke in a low voice. "Please take a look at this." Luo Shuqing and her husband locked gazes and took the notebook. An image had already appeared on the screen at this time. There was also noise in the background. This was the result of Luo Nen deliberately turning the volume to the maximum. The image was shaky at first. It wasn't clear, but there was a sharp DJ-like voice that suddenly rose up. "Look, this kid is as thin as a hemp stick. She's the most hateful lucky person in the fighting arena. She's the plunderer who harvests gambling money." Rue 1. The sound of cursing mixed in the background. It was the wanton venting of hundreds and thousands of spectators. They had all lost large amounts of wealth in the previous matches. They hated that damned skinny kid who didn't die to the bone. She lived through 3 life and death battles. She made countless people suffer, and she helped those lucky bastards. But today, she's going to face Ares, who has already won 97 matches. Our undefeated war god. There's no doubt that this is a deliberately arranged revenge. It's destined to be a bloody slaughter. Let's cheer, let's celebrate, and embrace the archetype of death. Luo Nan's voice cut in faintly amidst the tsunami-like cheers. This is the brother who has always been protecting her. Chapter 524. Mo Peng was the first to run over, attracted by the sound. Moya, who was lying on the sofa, perked up her ears. She was especially surprised that Luo Nan would actually take out this sort of thing, especially when the vulgar language erupted from the video. She blinked her eyes, got down on her bare feet, moved to her mother's side, and stuck her head out to watch. F***** Mo Peng cried out involuntarily at this very moment. His body unconsciously leaned back. because he saw the scene of Rue when being kicked off the stage by her older brother, Ares, in the fighting arena. But soon he couldn't even make a sound. He was stupefied on the spot amidst the sounds of bones being deliberately collected and the cheers of a tsunami. Luonan knew that this was the scene of Jack ruthlessly strangling Ares. The underground fighting arena under the control of Jack's gang did not allow things like mercy to appear. What awaited those contestants was certain death the moment they were discovered. Rue 1 was actually going to be eliminated back then. She was only able to live to this day because she was an experimental subject for a related plan and enjoyed the privilege of being exempted from death. There was no need to mention these things again. Just the scene played on the flexible screen was already enough. The video Luonan took out was the video he found after the Xia City branch eliminated Jack and dealt with the information related to Jack's gang. Yuan pulled them out and had an expert editor carry out the selection and splicing. It was used as a stepping stone for tonight's show, straightforward and cruel, but it had the power to shake the hearts of people. The video purposefully selected the scenes of Rue Wen's early life and death battles. It avoided the scenes of her neatly killing her opponent later on. It successfully created the image of a weak, pitiful, yet tenacious and unyielding lone chick. Mo Peng was the first to fall into the trap. His facial features unconsciously wrinkled together and his eyes squinted. He couldn't stand the blood, but he couldn't shift his gaze away. He grimaced as he watched, especially when he saw Rue when struggling to get up after being knocked to the ground again and again, while the audience below the stage cheered crazily and cruelly. He just felt that the bottom line of humanity had been completely broken through. This is 2F** King excessive. No one responded to him. Instead, Emoya used her keen ears to discern even more information from the clamorous cheers. For example, the flat-chested witch and the like. A woman! Emoya revealed a rare expression of shock and a bit of embarrassment. She's a woman? Luonan was a bit surprised. You don't know. Well, this was the fault of preconceived notions. Last night, in the dimly lit alley, Rue had short hair and thin clothes. She was thin and flat, without any feminine characteristics or temperament. Emoya's first impression of her was that she was a little boy. After that, at the Santa Maria Charity Hall, Emoya left early. At the administrative center, she arrived late and did not see the specific information collected, so she misunderstood along the way. This misunderstanding shouldn't have happened, but when it happened to Emoya, the effect was surprisingly good. Mrs. Luo Shuqing was already unable to endure the scene in the video. She lightly pinched her forehead to buffer it for a bit. She heard the conversation between Emoya and Luonan and couldn't help but shudder. A girl? How old are you? I'm really not too clear. After all, I'm an orphan. Luonan spoke the truth. The Xia City branch didn't find any original records of Rue Wen's time in the laboratory, but from what they could tell from her initial data in the underground fighting arena, she was as thin and weak as a 6 or 7-year-old child when she first arrived. It was only because of 3 years of continuous training and the effects of drugs that she grew into her current appearance. It was also because of this abnormal growth that her age became hard to decipher. Initial estimates indicated that she was very likely 13 or 14 years old. But looking at it from an extreme perspective, there was also a chance that she was 8 or 9 years old. Luonan didn't speak on this topic. He just said, I've heard that the reason for her current situation is due to her underdevelopment. There's also the damage caused by the drug ingredients. But the doctor says that if she keeps up with nutrition, she can still develop a second time. The more he said this, the more sympathy he aroused. Yuan had hired an expert editor with a high salary. It was really worth the money. Not only did his work clearly describe Rue Wen's experience, it also incorporated the extremely insulting remarks of the unscrupulous audience and the cruel words of life and death at every turn. Luo Shuqing was already angry when faced with these scenes. These lawless thugs? Are they in Xia City? The police and of course the SCA aren't doing anything good to allow this place to continue to operate. The innocent uncle didn't refute, but his gaze turned away from the video. He seemed to be deep in thought. Luonan saw that the time was about right. He gently took the notebook back from his aunt to avoid excessively agitating his family. But there were some words that needed to be said. Right now this underground fighting arena has already been destroyed, but there's a bit of a problem with the measures taken to deal with the aftermath. So much so that a child like Rue has to wander the streets. I feel that since I've run into her, I should help her out. With the video as a basis, whatever Luonen said right now had a sort of natural justice to it. Mo Peng had already subconsciously nodded his head. Fine, this person's opinion could be ignored. Luonen shot a glance at Moya. With his understanding of Moya and He Yuan and the analysis of the others, this older sister of his should have already given these two elders a heads-up, correcting their mental expectations. Sure enough, Uncle expressed very calmly, "You're right. It's fine if you don't know. But since you've run into it, you can't ignore it. But doing charity isn't a simple task. How do you want to do it?" They're on the right track. Luonen took a deep breath and followed the instructions on the document. He organized his words a bit and spoke softly. "I've discussed this child with Brother Chin and a few other friends. Recently, the Department of Civil Affairs has organized a Family Recognition Society activity for a few welfare homes that adopt vagrant orphans in the West. The main goal is to form a pair of helpers to help the orphans come into contact with normal families and society. We feel that this activity is pretty good, so we're mainly going through the procedures today. We're going to transfer Rue Wen's relationship to the Orchid Town Welfare Home in the Forest Wall District. We know the director of this welfare home. He's a pretty good person and he's a big-shot designer." Family Recognition Society. Moya had already finished searching on her wristband. She shot a glance at Luonen before speaking. "It's already been going on for quite a few years. It seems like the government is backing it up." "Yes, we've also considered this. And there's also Worker Zhai. He just so happens to be in Orchid Town and he's adopted a child. I've seen him before." Mrs. Luo Shuqing had a pensive look. "Worker Zhai, is he the one who helped you with your physics lessons? I remember that he works at the Crossover Electronic City, right?" "Yes, he's also an off-campus tutor for our school's Precision Electronics Interest Society. Here, this is a photo of them." Luonen used the virtual screen of his wristband to show his family. He had asked Di Weiwu to send this photo over. They were inside the welfare home. The two had natural expressions, and the environment was set up appropriately. It even gave off a bit of an artistic feeling. This activity is pretty good. Mrs. Luo Shuqing thought for a moment. It seems like the old Su couple from the company participated. They even posted it on their friends' circle 2 months ago. Luonen didn't respond. He just secretly clenched his fists. This was a good start. And the friends group also sent a wave of applauding emojis. The logic is clear. The expressions are on point. Old Zhai made a guest appearance in the background. I can take a screenshot for him. They've prepared quite amply. It looks like we don't need to get involved. The facts have proven that a certain someone has a talent for lying. Luonen recalled his previous speech. He felt that his performance was stable and he felt a bit proud. He Yuan's plan borrowed the name of the Family Recognition Society, and it was his own suggestion. He had obtained inspiration from the relationship between Worker Zhai and Di Weiwu. It looked like there was a layer separating it from direct adoption, and it was more troublesome. But after the relationship was confirmed, there was a buffer period of observation. It gave both sides a period of adaptation, and there was also the support of society. It was convenient to make a two-way choice, and it should be easier for the elders to accept it psychologically. Moreover, with Rue Wen's current situation, living at home for a long time would undoubtedly bring disaster to the family. This was the most realistic consideration. Nan Nan has thought things through very thoroughly. Luo Shuqing praised him sincerely. Being able to say this proved that she didn't reject this plan. Mo Haiheng followed up with his evaluation. What's even more rare is that you're able to walk the path. You're not just going through the motions. Luonen was a bit embarrassed. He hurriedly spoke the truth. A friend helped me with the details. He said that it's better this way. Mo Haihang and Luo Shuqing locked gazes and said, "This child's life is pitiful. Anyone who encounters her will want to extend a helping hand. We'll definitely help if we can. Since you've already walked the path, we'll make contact with the welfare home tomorrow and understand the situation. I still need to discuss the specifics with your aunt. It's getting late. You've been running around outside all day. Go to sleep first." "Huh? That's it?" Luo Nan was startled. Bamboo Pole reacted the fastest in the group. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. The adoption is a small matter. Right now, the focus is on you." Papercut agreed. "Yeah, maybe they don't want other children to know sensitive information. I think the test will come later." Luo Nan nodded imperceptibly and looked at Emoya. This older sister of his simply stretched her waist. She strode her long legs and went upstairs. "Then you guys discuss it. I still have work tomorrow. I'm going to sleep first. If I have time later, I'll go take a look at the welfare home. Lawn Town, right? Send me the address later." Mo Peng moved closer to the side. He wanted to say something, but his mother glared at him. "Go to sleep, everyone. Don't you have school tomorrow?" "That's hard to say. If the emergency situation continues, then maybe classes will be suspended. Let's go back to the house." Mo Peng shrugged his shoulders and pulled Luo Nan upstairs with him. At the same time, he spoke in a low voice. "I support you. Beautifully done." Luo Nan smiled at him. If his family had voted for him, then he would have already won by now. Of course, this wasn't the truth, but it more or less explained a kind of momentum. The two went upstairs and returned to their respective rooms. Luo Nan changed into home clothes, but he didn't wash up. This was because he knew that tonight's test had yet to end. Sure enough, the sound of knocking came from the door not long after. He took a deep breath and went forward to open the door. His uncle, Mo Haihang, stood outside by himself. "Is it convenient? I want to understand a bit more about this matter." Luo Nan nodded and invited Mo Haihang in. Mo Haihang sat on a chair in front of the desk, while Luo Nan sat on the bed. The room was a bit silent in the beginning, but Mo Haihang soon broke everything. "You've seen Ruewin's fight?" "I've seen it." "Live?" "Yeah." Chapter 525. The first emotion that emerged in Luo Nan's heart when faced with his uncle's doubt was not nervousness. Instead, he let out a secret sigh of relief. It's finally here. Actually, this was much better than the worst-case scenario shown in the plan. Only one uncle and aunt came, and it was the wise and rational uncle. It was clear that they wanted to have a heart-to-heart chat, not a three-way joint hearing. This was already the most ideal situation. The more it was like this, the more he couldn't screw things up. The group of friends entered a state of silence at this time. Everyone had a tacit understanding to let Luo Nan calm his mind. Luo Nan carefully compared the plan in the document. He first silently apologized to his uncle. To the outside world, it was a relatively long period of silence. Then he spoke. "It was an accident." Mo Haihang was unable to be satisfied with this answer. He frowned slightly. "Accident? When did the accident happen?" "September 30th. "Which one?" "The night of September 30th, the Mid-Autumn Festival. We went to see Grandpa that day. You guys said that he could be at any time." Mo Haihang recalled seriously for a moment. His brows locked even tighter. "Our entire family was together that day, aside from Emoya, from morning till night. But I was unconscious for a period of time. That night, after I met Yen Yonghua, it was at that time that I went to the fighting arena." Mo Haihang opened his mouth when he heard Yen Yonghua's name. In the end, he forcefully swallowed the words "nonsense" back down. His rational side prevailed, and the bizarre logic that had been circling in his mind naturally pushed out the answer. "Out-of-body state?" A group of people exploded in the group of friends. "Damn, he really is knowledgeable." It's normal for a high-level SCA technician to know a few things. The key is how to deal with it. Looking at this guy's expression, he must have guessed something beforehand, right? Speaking of which, is he about to confess? I want to see the document written by Secretary He. Luo Nan continued to calm his breathing amidst the chaotic messages in the group. He did his best to look at his uncle with a calm gaze. That's right. His uncle had a basic concept of this sort of thing. Since this was the case, he could save some words. From now on, the element of lies began to permeate. It had officially entered an irreversible domain. I was a soul-bound at the time. My consciousness was entrusted to. The sound of flapping wings could be heard clearly in the pitter-patter of rain outside the window. Luo Nen made a gesture, and the automatic curtains slowly opened. An enormous bird could be seen extending its claws to hook onto the windowsill. Under the illumination of the light in the room, its pitch-black feathers seemed to completely melt into the darkness of the night. It's called ink. It was originally a very common bald crow. But I would use it to conduct some experiments, so now I've become a little different from a normal crow. That night, after my ability sprouted, part of my consciousness was placed on ink. I wanted to track down Yen Yongbua and find out more about that guy, but I ran into something along the way. I met a friend and took a wrong turn, entering the recycling stratum of the River Wu district. There, we discovered that underground combat arena and met Rue-1. Luo Nan spoke to this point in a single breath. His heartbeat had already sped up unconsciously. Right now, he really couldn't go back. Mo Haihang was obviously stunned. He looked at Luo Nan, then he stared at ink outside the window. This happened a few times, but he actually didn't pursue the matter. He just said softly, "Then, are you an ability user now? Did you join?" Luo Nan nodded and finished speaking in a single breath. "Yes, after I sent my soul to ink, I helped my friend destroy that underground combat arena. And that friend was a member of the Xia City branch. Also, there were members of the branch in the hospital where I stayed that day. Over and over again, they recruited me into the society. Last week, I officially awakened. My abilities are soul attachment and precise perception." "You've awakened?" Mo Haihang subconsciously confirmed once more. His absent-minded state was quite obvious. Luo Nen just went, "Yep." Red Fox, who had been rather quiet all this time, suddenly roasted in his friend group. "Official awakening. This is the most disgusting joke I've ever heard." Zhang Yingying also chimed in. "Sure enough, secretaries are all black-hearted and black-handed. This document is quite lacking in sincerity. For this group of people to speak like this, it proved that the current situation hadn't gone astray." Sure enough, Luo Nan's uncle had done some mental preparation. He accepted Luo Nan's words in a dazed but smooth state. Several seconds later, he asked, "What happened to you? How did you feel at the Xia City branch?" Luo Nan didn't know what his uncle had left unsaid. He could only respond step by step. "The people there are quite nice. Everyone treats me quite well." Mo Haihang thought of another young man who was quite close to Luo Nan. "Shuele, is he also a member of the branch?" "Yeah, but he joined the society later than me. I was the one who recruited him into the society. Jim Master Shou approved of it." "Really? If that's the case, then of course it's great." Mo Haihang suddenly laughed. He had many more questions that he wanted to ask in depth. But he, who had rich experience in society, knew very well that it was impossible to interrogate Luo Nan about all of Luo Nan's ins and outs with just a few words. It wasn't just Luo Nan. The ability user society probably wouldn't allow it either. He could only continue to ask in a chatty manner, like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water. "You've been in the society for over 2 months now. How have you been doing during this time? What kind of work has the society arranged for you normally?" "I don't have any clear duties right now. After all, I just joined the society not too long ago. My initiation training has just ended." The group of friends hissed. A certain person didn't have any clear duties, but the society didn't need to specifically arrange for him to find work for others from time to time. Even Mo Haihang didn't quite believe it. After all, Luo Nan had experienced quite a few things over the past 2 months. He could recall it with a single thought. What happened at Frost River reality? That was the order of justice going crazy. I just happened to be there at the right time. Plus, President Ouyang and Her Majesty Empress Wu have already suppressed the matter. Luonan knew that it wasn't easy to win people's trust with these words. He thought for a bit and faced the uniformly raised middle finger from his group of friends. He spoke without thinking. I was just unlucky that time. So far, the real work that the society has arranged for me is last month. I cooperated with a subordinate studio of the society to do some investigative work. It mainly involved the infiltration of mutants into Xia City. Infiltration of mutants? Cough. Right now, my work is already done. Actually, it's very simple. I just need to divert some of my energy to ink. Then I'll let it do its work. Bamboo Pole finally had the chance to remind Luonan. Stop. Stop. That's about it. Talking too much might make things worse. Luonan stopped in time. Mo Haihang, who was at the center of the authority department, automatically filled in the details. If it's the infiltration of mutants, is it the one that Trigate Security filed a case last month? Luonan felt it was a bit strange. They filed a case? But there's been no news from the government. This involves far too much sensitive information. Revealing it to the public will only cause chaos. Speaking up to this point, Mo Haihang had already formed a closed loop with Luonan's confession. The specific time, location, reason, and development were all present. Now, even concrete examples were listed out. Just the logical chain alone already had a relatively trustworthy skeleton. All that was left was the various details. But what was the point of mulling over these things? And so, Mo Haihang asked a few more questions about the changes in Luonan's daily life. Then, he stopped this round of heart-to-heart conversation. What do you want to do now? Let's continue like this for now. It's not bad. Luonan spoke vaguely and looked over impatiently. Should I tell Aunt about these things? Mo Haihang was a bit startled. Then he laughed bitterly. Let me think about it. You two, father and son, seem like you were born to give me problems. Luonan was startled by the sudden mention of that person. Then he saw Mo Haihang get up to leave. That's it. Just a few superficial questions like dragonflies skimming the surface of the water were enough to get through? Luonan was a bit stupefied. He stood up instinctively. Uncle. Mo Haihang really did walk out. He only turned around and warned Luonan when he opened the door. The Ability User Society is a large vat of dye. Their reputation in Xia City is pretty good. But you need to pay attention. Don't stray from the path. Luonan could only nod in agreement. He watched Mo Haihang walk out and close the door. But then he sensed that Mo Haihang didn't return to his room. Instead, he went to the study. There, he pondered in a daze. In the group chat, Papercut was baffled. That's it? That can't be right. Bamboo Pole expressed. How could it be that easy to fool them? Since they're people from the SCA, a series of confirmations will certainly be unavoidable in the next few days. But it's most convenient for a secretary to clean up their mess. We don't need to worry about it. Then let's disperse. Disperse. Thank you, everyone. Luonan expressed his thanks in the group chat. Then he closed the shared perspective. He lay on his bed, closed his eyes, and recalled his previous words to see if there were any slip-ups. Nearly 90% of Luonan's words were true. It was just that he had been sloppy in certain key aspects of nature, confusing up a few timelines. Though Mo Haihang grasped far more information resources than ordinary people, he wasn't a member of the inner world. It was like learning a foreign language for the first time. He could understand the meaning, but the color of emotion, the degree of seriousness, and so on were hard to grasp. This gave Luonan the opportunity to speak vaguely. Truly, I brought this upon myself. Not even half an hour had passed since he returned home, but Luonan was physically and mentally exhausted. He wasn't this tired even when he ambushed and killed Jin Tong. Luonan was at a loss for a long time whether or not he should tell part of the truth to his elders. But Yuan told him. Let's not talk about Uncle Mo Haihong's work resources in the SCA. Just consider the careers of Luonan's grandfather, father, and mother in the wilderness back in the day, as well as related sensitive matters. This determined the essential difference between his family's elders and those ignorant ordinary people. It was impossible to hide it. It was just a matter of how to express it. Actually, according to He Yuan's intentions, it was better to make a decision when it was necessary. Since things had already reached this stage, it was better to tell them everything and then immediately take measures to firmly protect his family. Of course, this was a fortress of safety established at the cost of completely destroying the normal lives of Luonan's family. And even He Yuan found it hard to guarantee that their family would truly be worry-free from then on. After all, it was impossible for the Xia City branch's strength to cooperate with the allies of Xia City's military and political departments, who didn't have a firm stance. In the end, Luonan chose to tell them part of the truth in order to ease the anxiety in the hearts of his two elders. Since he had set this goal, he had to hide all the information of pressure, danger, and the like. But he had to take responsibility for what he hid. It didn't matter if it was in his family or in the vast world. Otherwise, he would just be an idiot who avoided reality and harmed his loved ones. Luonan felt that he wasn't smart enough, but an idiot. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.